Chapter 2139, Holy Daughter and Ran. Chapter 2139, Holy Daughter and Ran. This black-robed elder's face was covered with wrinkles, and he looked to be in his 60s or 70s. His hair was completely white and his body slightly hunched, appearing old and decrepit. However, Ling Han did not dare to underestimate this old geezer in the slightest, because this old geezer's strength was unfathomable. He had definitely surpassed the dividing soul, and might be at the immortal palace tier or ascending origin tier. It should not be that he was a celestial king. There was no celestial king that would lower themselves to this extent. Furthermore, he was not wrapped by any strange lights, either. This was a symbol of celestial king tier. Ling Han smiled. "Old sir, how do I address you?" "I would not dare. This old servant's surname is Chen, and I am a person who takes care of trivial matters in the palace. Young Master Ling can just address me as Manager Chen," the black-robed elder said, his attitude appearing incredibly humble. "Manager Chen." Ling Han bowed. "I have troubled you." "No trouble, no trouble." Manager Chen chuckled. "Please follow me." The old man walked ahead, while Ling Han followed behind him. As they walked, Manager Chen would give Ling Han a commentary about which place was which lord's abode. For example, the spiritual mountain celestial king and the others would naturally have a palace of their own, which was like a different world inside, and was incredibly colossal. All of a sudden, Ling Han's steps paused. He felt a menacing intent enshroud him, as if there was a supreme divine sword that was just about to stab a hole through him. This old servant pays respects to Holy Daughter and Ran. Manager Chen bent his waist in respect in a certain direction, while his gaze roamed over Ling Han, showing a hint of surprise, seemingly stunned that Ling Han had actually been able to also discover something was off. Was it a coincidence? If it was not a coincidence, then this boy's awareness was really too sensitive. A red figure flashed, and a woman leaped out. She wore a bright red body-fitting suit, outlining her pride-worthy, voluptuous figure on full display. Her beauty was also astonishingly exquisite. Though she was not as beautiful as the Empress and Hu Niu, she was on par with bewitching Maiden Ru, but her style was strikingly different. Bewitching Maiden Ru was captivatingly seductive, while this woman was fiery, just like a rose with thorns. This was Shang Jiwei's personal disciple. Her name was Anran, and she was also known as Holy Daughter Anran. Anran nodded slightly at Manager Chen. Though this person was not a celestial king, he was an old servant of the Four Seas Palace, and was deeply trusted by Shang Jiwei. Thus, she also gave him some face. Otherwise, who could garner a second glance from her if they were not a celestial king? She glanced at Ling Han again, and calmly stated, "Get out immediately from the Four Seas city, and don't have any wild delusions." She was really overbearing, and did not care what Ling Han's own thoughts were at all. There was only one word that she wanted to say: scram. Ling Han chuckled, and replied, "Sure, but I will have to trouble you to send me off." He indeed wanted to leave, but without handing Hu Niu over, there was absolutely no way that Shang Jiwei would deliver him out of here. Thus, if Anran could send him out of the Four Seas city, Ling Han would naturally leave happily. Anran's eyes became harsh. "Send you off?" What was the meaning of that? Trying to get close to her. She humphed, "I'll give you 1 day's time, and if you are still staying in the city by this time tomorrow, then don't blame me for having no mercy." Having said that, she turned, and left directly. Ling Han rubbed his nose. This woman was really overbearing. Who cares? Counter soldiers with arms, and water with an earth weir. Manager Chen approached, and softly asked, "Young Master Ling, should the Imperial Empress step in?" This person was definitely one of Shang Jiwei's trusted aides. Would any ordinary person be qualified to have a direct audience with Shang Jiwei? And hearing his tone, it seemed that he could see her whenever he wanted to. This kind of royal favor was really strong. Ling Han shook his head. "It's fine. Just let her be. Young Master Ling, you must not be careless. Holy Daughter Anran is a first secret monarch tier, and though you are also extremely talented, you are only at the dividing soul tier. After all," Manager Chen continued. "Wouldn't I still have the help of Manager Chen in that case?" Ling Han asked smilingly. He did not know what Manager Chen's cultivation level was, but he had an instinctive feeling that his strength definitely had to be stronger than Enrant's, and much stronger at that. Manager Chen had not thought that Ling Han would reply like this, and involuntarily faltered before breaking into a smile. This brat was really interesting. He did not have the arrogance that other monarchs had at all, not considering every other being beneath himself like them. If it was Lin Xian, he would definitely talk tough and say that he would resolve the matter himself. However, if he really made that choice, he would only be seeking his own suffering. Of course, Manager Chen would definitely not just sit by and watch, but he would only interfere when Ling Han was in life-threatening danger. However, with these words from Ling Han, it was definitely impossible that he would delay so long before interfering. Ling Han was clearly a super monarch, but did not have the common ailment of stubborn pride. That was good. Since young Master Ling has already said this, I naturally would not be sitting by and watching, Manager Chen said with a slight smile. He gestured for them to continue on their way. Young Master Ling, please. Manager Chen, please. Led by Manager Chen, Ling Han toured all over the Four Seas Palace. As for Four Seas City, he could not do the same. That was because it was too large. If he were really to take a tour around there, it could not be done without a few days' time. After his tour, Manager Chen arranged accommodations for Ling Han. The matters for tomorrow should be left for tomorrow. Ling Han couldn't bother himself to think too hard, either. With a flash, his figure had already entered the Black Tower. Even if there was only one day, he had no wish to waste it, either. At present, he had already opened the upper limits to his cultivation level, and urgently wished to break through to Heaven Soul, and after reaching Heaven Soul, he would not need to go to any mystery realm. He would be able to rapidly condense his fifth divided soul, and aim for the true complete pinnacle of the dividing soul tier. Of course, he was presently still short of one source power of heaven and earth. Small tower, how awesome would it be to condense 9 divided souls? Ling Han asked. He was very curious about this aspect. Having 9 divided souls, just what kind of concept was that? Fifth severance could match Yang Soul, so wouldn't dividing 9 souls be capable of killing even fifth secrets? You are overthinking things, Small Tower scoffed. It had never been one to spare anyone with its words. The gap between the dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier is too wide. Even if you condensed 8 divided souls, you could not possibly match immortal palace tier. Ling Han heard the hidden meaning in its words. Which also means that dividing 9 souls would be able to match it. Finally, no longer so stupid, Small Tower said. Dividing 9 souls could match immortal palace tier, but that was only limited to the first secret of the immortal palace tier. Not only was the gap between the immortal palace tier and dividing soul tier extremely wide, the gap was wide as well between every minor level. I am only short of one source power of heaven and earth, Ling Han murmured. By now, he was not too far off from Heaven Soul, and his need of 9 source powers of heaven and earth had also suddenly become urgent. Small Tower did not say anything further. Ling Han focused hard on cultivation inside the Black Tower, and Hu Niu and the Empress were still attempting to collect the source power of heaven and earth. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Ru and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were rather unoccupied. It was naturally extremely dull to just continue cultivating. One day in the outside world would be 1,000 days inside the Black Tower. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, feeling a sliver of improvement in his cultivation level. Ling Han. Right at this moment, Enrant's cold humph was heard from outside. Here she was. Ling Han walked out, and saw that Enran had come in without an invitation. She stood in the middle of the courtyard, and there was actually a young man beside her as well. He bore a modest smile on his face, but every movement was showing his arrogance, showing that his modest display was actually just an act. You haven't scrammed, Enran declared coldly, appearing extremely displeased. I'm waiting for you to send me off, Ling Han said smilingly. Cheeky mouth. Enrant's beautiful eyes narrowed in a glare, and a terrifying pressure spread out like a tsunami. Enran, allow me. That young man stretched out his arm to hold her back, and his gaze turned on Ling Han, showing a strong contempt and dislike. Chapter 2140 Bet. Chapter 2140 Bet. This young man's name was Lin Xian. He was the spiritual mountain celestial king's disciple, and was outstandingly talented. At present, his cultivation level was at first secret of immortal palace tier, and his battle prowess had reached third secret of immortal palace tier. He was a noble, great monarch tier. This also filled him with brimming confidence, and he dared to court a prodigious woman like An Ran. When he found out that Shang Jiwei had the intention to betroth An Ran to Ling Han, he was naturally both furious and anxious. What right did Ling Han have? Lin Xian had courted An Ran for so many years, and who in the entire Four Seas Palace did not know that? If Ling Han were to rob him of his woman, how would he be able to face others in the future? Moreover, it was very possible that An Ran would inherit the position of Imperial Empress, which was also one of the reasons that he definitely could not give up. A brat that had popped out from who knew where actually dared to try and snatch his woman? He was seeking death. Of course, he only dared to just imagine killing Ling Han. This was a person that Shang Jiwei favored greatly. Otherwise, how could she want to marry An Ran, whom she treated as her own daughter, to him? Thus, he did not dare do anything fatal to Ling Han at all, but just went along with An Ran's thoughts on expelling Ling Han from Four Seas City. This naturally would be the best of both worlds. He would have won An Ran's favor, and at the same time would not anger Shang Zhu. Expelling Ling Han was An Ran's idea. An Ran was disdainful of Ling Han, and hearing Lin Xian speak, she nodded. Ling Han was merely an earth soul, and should either herself or Lin Xian move, they would be able to deal with him in a couple of moves. You could have escaped unscathed, Lin Xian said. He strode forwards. But since you are so determined to seek your own humiliation, you can't blame anyone for it, either. Without waiting for Ling Han to answer at all, he stretched out his hand to grab out at Ling Han. Young Master Lin, please be lenient. A black figure flashed past, stepping in front of Ling Han, and allowing Lin Xian's palm strike to approach. When it landed on his body, Lin Xian's whole palm was embedded into his body. That was Manager Chen. Though Lin Xian's whole hand had sunk into his chest, he seemed to have not realized this fact at all. There was no change to his tone of voice, either. Ling Han had seen very clearly that Manager Chen's chest had turned into sand, and when this palm strike from Lin Xian landed, it had not hit anything solid, so it was naturally impossible that it would cause any kind of damage. This old geezer was definitely an ascending origin tier. A ninth heaven celestial king might not be able to lift someone else directly to the celestial king tier, but it should be no problem for the ascending origin tier. With how much Shang Jiwei trusted Manager Chen, even if he was just at first severance, or second severance, she would still be able to forcefully boost his cultivation level to the ascending origin tier. Lin Xian frowned, and asked, Elder Chen, why are you stopping me? There was a seventh heaven celestial king backing Lin Xian up, and he originally should not have to be so respectful towards an ascending origin tier, and could directly address him by name. However, the person backing Manager Chen was Shang Jiwei, and he was very much trusted by her. With this, Lin Xian could only be extremely polite. To say nothing of him, even if the spiritual mountain celestial king was here, he would at the very least not simply issue commands to Manager Chen. Manager Chen chuckled. Young Master Ling is an honored guest of our Four Seas Palace, and thus I have the duty of protecting our honored guest, so please forgive me, young Master Lin. Lin Xian was immediately speechless. The other party had used major principles to suppress him, so how was he supposed to refute? Now it is a personal matter between me and him, and Ran was not willing to give in. Elder Chen, please do not interfere. Young miss, please do not make things difficult for me, either. Manager Chen showed a troubled expression. Naturally, it was impossible that An Ran would cross over Manager Chen and make a move on Ling Han. Thus, she only looked at Ling Han, and said, when a man acts, he dares to take responsibility for his actions. To have another step up for you, do you not feel ashamed? Ling Han scratched his head, his expression simple and honest. You are an immortal palace tier, and I am only a dividing soul tier. How am I supposed to fight you? As long as you can parry a blow from me, I will temporarily allow you to stay here, An Ran declared proudly. This naturally was not letting Ling Han off easy, but rather that she intended to seriously injure Ling Han with this strike, or even kill him. Afterwards, even if she would be reprimanded by Shang Jiwei, the latter would have nothing to say. In any case, with how much Ran was doted on, worst came to worst, she would be pelted with a harsh scolding, but for her to resign herself and marry Ling Han was an absolute impossibility. One strike. Ling Han hurriedly pretended to shake his head. The gap between the dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier is really too wide. To say nothing that you are a first secret monarch tier, even if you were an ordinary first secret, I would still be killed by one strike from you. This brat was not stupid, Lin Xian thought from the sidelines. Unfortunately, he was really too greedy, or he should have known that Ran was definitely someone way beyond his station. The difference in strength between the immortal palace tier and dividing soul tier was like the difference between heaven and earth, and that was the same for their status. Perhaps Ling Han would only be capable of remaining in the dividing soul tier for his whole life. But Ran would at least be capable of becoming a fifth heaven celestial king, or could possibly even inherit Shang Jiwei's legacy, and become the strongest ninth heaven celestial king in the celestial realm. Lin Xian did not know that there was still the heavenly venerable tier above ninth heaven celestial king tier. Only a very limited number of people knew this kind of secret. Even if you are outmatched, I still won't kill you, Ran said deliberately. Her aim was to coerce Ling Han into agreeing. Are you even a man? Ling Han purposely displayed an expression of anger. Who says I am not a man? Then, come and parry a strike from me. Fine. It seemed like Ling Han could no longer tolerate being spurred on, and agreed. Lin Xian immediately showed a disdainful expression. What an idiot, to completely lose his wits just with a few words. This kind of person was not worthy of his serious regard at all. He just had to scheme a little, and he would be able to easily get him killed. Meanwhile, Manager Chen was shocked. With how Ling Han had behaved yesterday, he was clearly a calm, steady person. How could he have been so easily angered? There was something off. However, Ling Han dragged out the word. I am no idiot. Why should I allow you to hit me when there is no benefit? Unless you agree that if I can parry a strike from you, you will give me a few celestial medicines. A few celestial medicines? Brat, you are really demanding an exorbitant price. Who do you think you are? Taking a hit, and that is worth a few celestial medicines? No problem. Ran agreed without the slightest hesitation. She was naturally being so straightforward because her killing intent was already spurred. She intended to kill Ling Han. Thus, no matter what kind of harsh conditions the latter demanded, so what? Ling Han was not so easily dismissed. He stretched out his hand. Then, we'll make this bet. Take out the stakes of the bet. I fear you would renege on the bet. Do you think I would renege on our bet? Ran was infuriated. She was the holy daughter of the Four Seas Palace and also the most favored disciple of Shang Jiwei. Her word was as good as gold, so how could she possibly break her word? In any case, if you don't take out the celestial medicines, I am not going to play. Ling Han's attitude was determined. Fine. Ran finally nodded. Spreading open her right hand, 3 celestial medicines lay in her palm. 7 million years, 30 million years plus, and 200 billion 50 million years. Ling Han swept a glance over, and couldn't help but shake his head continuously. I say, do you think you are fooling a beggar here? Celestial medicines of this age cannot even be considered preliminary quality, and Ran was involuntarily surprised. She had not thought that Ling Han's eyes were so sharp. He had just swept an eye over them, and he had completely clearly distinguished the age of the 3 celestial medicines. She gave Ling Han a second look, a feeling of alertness rising up in her heart. It can't be that this brat is a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? But upon further thought, she shook her head inwardly. No matter what, there was absolutely no way that a dividing soul tier could match an immortal palace tier, even if it was just parrying a strike. Moreover, she was a first secret monarch tier, her battle prowess directly soaring to the height of third secret. No matter how heaven-defying Ling Han was, it was useless. He would definitely be killed instantly with a strike. With another wave of her hand, 3 new celestial medicines appeared in her hand. Chapter 2141, Tricked. Chapter 2141, Tricked. Only then did Ling Han break into a smile. Finally, We have some sincerity. All right, I will take a blow from you. He first took over the celestial medicines from Anran's hands. If she refused, he would not begin the bet, either, so Anran could only give in. However, Anran was not concerned, either. In any case, once Ling Han died, she would be able to take back whatever she gave out. Are you done? Anran asked impatiently. She had never accommodated someone so much before. Even if there hadn't been the previous matter of betrothal, she would have felt an impulse to kill Ling Han. Sure, of course, Ling Han replied, laughing. Young Master Ling, Manager Chen spoke up. He knew Anran very well. She was definitely not betting with Ling Han for fun, but was rather going to take Ling Han's life without the slightest hesitation. Otherwise, she would not have been Anran. Thus, Manager Chen wanted to advise Ling Han not to do so. At a critical moment, he would even use brute force to forcibly take the other away and leave. Ling Han was a person that Shang Jiwei had deliberately instructed that he had to take good care of, and no harm could be allowed to come to him. It's fine. Ling Han winked at Manager Chen. Manager Chen was inwardly surprised. In his impression, Ling Han was definitely not the type that would be so greedy to the point of risking his own life, what more when this was no longer a risk he was taking, but rather committing suicide. Why had Ling Han agreed to the battle? Could it be that he had some kind of special technique to deal with an immortal Palisteer? Hesitating, Manager Chen took a step back, and made no further attempt to stop them. Anran moved. Boom, her slender hand spread open, her fingers like mountains that enveloped Ling Han. Wang, Ling Han's figure trembled. The whole 30,000 meters of surrounding space warped to become multiple mirrors, and an image of Ling Han was placed in every single mirror. This. Anran couldn't help but falter. Which of them was Ling Han's true self? This move had indeed exceeded her expectations. Ling Han had actually grasped regulations of space, and was actually so skilled at them. Boom, the attack surged past, and the space mirrors shattered one after another. The Ling Hands within them were also naturally shattered by the impact, but there was still around 1/3 of space mirrors that were unscathed. As long as there was still one spiritual void manifestation, Ling Han's true self could freely switch with it. Thus, this blow naturally did not cause the slightest bit of damage to Ling Han. Ling Han smiled. Thank you for the business, please see yourself out. You. Anran was first taken aback, and then flew into an abrupt fury. She naturally knew that she had fallen for Ling Han's trick. This brat was really a wolf in sheep's clothing. He had obviously grasped the regulations of space, and possessed a very strong survival ability, yet pretended to use all sorts of excuses, purposely inciting her to take out celestial medicines to use as stakes for their bet. Too devious, too cunning. Was this still a man? Meanwhile, Manager Chen was stroking his beard and smiling slightly. So it turned out that Ling Han had this kind of ability. No wonder he dared to accept such a bet. Anran glared at Ling Han for a while, and then said, "Take another blow from me." "Yi, didn't you just say that I only have to take one blow?" Ling Han feigned shock. Anran was indeed overbearing, but she was also proud at the same time. Hearing Ling Han's words, her face involuntarily reddened. With her status, she should not have made a move on a dividing soul tier, and now making a move once was not enough, and she actually wanted to do it a second time. This was too embarrassing. "Do you dare take another blow from me?" She could only continue to spur him on like this. Ling Han extended his hand, and then crooked a finger. "Take out another 3 celestial medicines, and they all have to be over 1 billion years in age. If the celestial medicine was over 1 billion years old, then even a dividing soul tier could use them. Of course, if it was 10 billion years or 100 billion years and above, that would definitely be even better." Anran thought for a while. She had already seen this move from Ling Han, so it was definitely impossible that she would be deceived again. Fine, again. She took out another 3 celestial medicines, and they were all over 1 billion years in age. Only someone like her, a disciple of a 9th heaven celestial king, would be that wealthy. Ling Han accepted them happily, smiling widely, and stated, "Come on then." Anran moved again. This time, she had directly used a celestial technique. A desolate aura surged out. It was as if she had become a great beast that originated from the ancient era. She only had to move slightly, and she would be capable of even shattering the heaven and earth. Having fallen for Ling Han's trick once, she set aside all her previous contempt, and considered Ling Han as a real opponent. Boom, she sent out a punch. Instantly, the space was ripped apart, and the force endlessly spread out in all directions. In an instant, it had covered an area of 30,000 meters, and was still spreading out continuously. Ling Han did not use the power of space, but rather took this blow head-on. Boom, the strike immediately landed solidly on him, and his figure was sent flying like he was a cannonball. However, Ran, Manager Chen, and Lin Xian all showed expressions of shock at the same time. That was because though Ling Han had been sent flying, his body was completely undamaged. How was this possible? Taking such a terrifying blow, Ling Han should logically have been turned into pieces. How was it possible that he was practically unharmed? There were indeed some traces of blood at the corners of his lips, but this kind of injury was completely negligible. He was still who knew how far off from actual death. With a bang, Ling Han crashed heavily into a stone pillar, and his body was immediately stopped. Then, he slid back down, but before his body had landed completely on the ground, he had already stood up by himself. He had taken another blow, and he had done so with great ease. This was because he had directly channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and for a short time, his defenses would be boosted to a terrifying extent. He would be able to easily take on even the full force blow of a first secret monarch tier. Ran and the others were gaping widely, still in a state of deep shock and astonishment. Previously, though Ling Han had also parried a strike from Ran, it had been due to a stroke of cleverness, and he had not confronted Ran directly. However, it was completely different this time round. Ling Han had sustained a blow head-on, and it was a blow with full force from Ran at that. Awesome to the extreme. With this strike, there was nothing Ran could say or complain about. However, she became even more infuriated. You obviously had that kind of strength, but why had you not used it during the first time? This guy was clearly wanting to scam her for her celestial medicines. Realization suddenly dawned on her. This guy that looked to be slightly dumb was instead a prodigy. He had deliberately lured her into the trap, tricking her twice for her celestial medicines. Had she ever been tricked before? There was definitely no such instance. Firstly, no one would dare, and secondly, with her prodigious genius, who could successfully trick her? Yet now, one such person had appeared. He had not only tricked her, he had done it twice. Ran was angered to the point of madness. However, she had no choice but to be impressed by Ling Han's strength. This guy was really outrageously bold, and he did indeed have heaven-defying techniques. Even she had to admit that she was impressed. Good, good, good. She said the word 3 times. Even if she was angered to the point of wanting to commit murder, she could not bring herself to make another move on Ling Han. If she were to move on a dividing soul tier 3 times consecutively, her pride would not allow that. She turned and left. At least for the moment, she could not possibly come again to deal with Ling Han. Meanwhile, Lin Xian looked longer at Ling Han before turning around, and leaving as well. He had already tagged Ling Han as a powerful enemy that he had to get rid of. His display was too heaven-defying. If he broke through again to the Immortal Palace tier, then wouldn't he be completely unmatched? Young Master Ling, very well done. Manager Chen said, smiling widely, and even gave Ling Han a thumbs up. Ling Han smiled slightly. Manager Chen is too polite. This junior just has thick skin and coarse flesh. Manager Chen only smiled in response. Ling Han was both brave and smart. It was nothing as simple as just having heaven-defying defenses. Furthermore, he dared to even trick Holy Daughter Ran. In the Four Seas Palace, this was definitely the first time it happened. Chapter 2142 Reaching Heaven Soul Quietly. Chapter 2142 Reaching Heaven Soul Quietly. Ling Han settled down in the Four Seas Palace. Every day, he would be studying Great Tao, and at the same time would also be concocting alchemical pills. Shang Jiwei had very good patience. She had been alive for who knew how many epochs, so she naturally did not mind waiting 8 to 10 years, or even several 100 billion years. She would have this kind of patience naturally because she took Ling Han as her own son-nephew. Otherwise, she would have just killed him and been done with it. However, it was also not realistic for Ling Han to leave Four Seas City. Shang Jiwei would definitely not allow him to leave before he handed over Hu Niu. Thus, he could only cultivate and improve his skill in alchemy. In the blink of an eye, 7 years had already passed. 7 years had passed in the outside world, and with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, as long as 7,000 years had passed, and the time spent comprehending Tao underneath the reincarnation tree was even more overwhelmingly long, and added with how Shang Jiwei doted on him, she would deliver all kind of precious cultivation resources to him, causing his cultivation level to soar all the way to the pinnacle of Earth Soul. Ling Han estimated that if he had not had Shang Jiwei's support, he would only have been able to reach this level in over 1,000 years. Even the Black Tower was not omnipotent. From this, it was also clear that Shang Jiwei was really treating him like her own son, which also caused Ling Han a headache. In the future, if Hu Niu were to become enemies with Shang Jiwei, he would definitely be on Hu Niu's side, but if he was to step in to deal with Shang Jiwei, that would be really too ungrateful. Whatever, he'd put the matter aside for now. The Rock Palace possessed Yang Soul Ocean, Earth Soul Mountain, and the Sort, so considering the Four Seas Palace was its equal, would they also have this kind of mystery realm? Of course they would. Thus, when Ling Han reached peak stage Earth Soul, he went to the Heaven Soul Pool to break through. Merely a month later, he had reached consummate level, and successfully advanced to Heaven Soul tier, catching up with Hu Niu, the Empress, and the others in cultivation level. And another piece of good news came. The Empress and Hu Niu had subdued the source power of heaven and earth at about the same time. They managed to succeed firstly because their own natural talent in cultivation was extremely high, and they were qualified to subdue source powers of heaven and earth, and secondly because the Black Dragon King had used a secret technique to weaken the resistance of the source power of heaven and earth, thus allowing the two women to succeed easily. Otherwise, even a celestial king would need tens of millions of years to collect a source power of heaven and earth. Even with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, the two women had only spent more than 10,000 years. Ling Han. Hu Niu pounced into Ling Han's arms, greedily sniffing the scent that belonged solely to him. Niu missed you to death. No slight distraction could take place when collecting a source power of heaven and earth. Otherwise, not only would all previous efforts be completely wasted, the source power of heaven and earth would also abandon you and leave. This was always only a one-time opportunity. Thus, Hu Niu could only suppress her nature earlier. For her, this was really not very easily done. Ling Han laughed loudly, and spun around 3 times where he stood while hugging Hu Niu. The Empress also pounced. She looked down proudly on the world, and would directly express any fondness she felt. She would not pay any regard to the thoughts of others. Ling Han also embraced the Empress, and felt as if embracing these two women in his arms was like embracing the whole world, and his heart also became incredibly steadfast. He would definitely safeguard this happiness. Niu is going out to play. Hu Niu acted spoiled in Ling Han's arms for a while, and then couldn't help but call out. She had a playful nature, and she had been in seclusion for over 10,000 years continuously this time. She naturally felt suffocated. Ling Han's expression changed lightly. Shaking his head, he said, "Niu, you won't be able to leave here for the moment." "Why?" Hu Niu's expression was filled with curiosity. Ling Han sighed, and after slight hesitation, he told her the truth about how the Rock Palace had already been destroyed by the Four Seas Palace. That despicable old witch, Niu will kill her. After Hu Niu heard this, she was immediately howling in anger. Indeed, she had not liked how Long Yueshi would interfere in all her matters, but after so many years, she had naturally developed very strong affections for Long Yueshi, just like how a mischievous granddaughter would feel towards her grandmother. She was not so concerned about the destruction of the Rock Palace, but Long Yueshi's death still made her extremely furious. She wanted to leap out of the Black Tower, and seek out Shang Jiwei for vengeance. Ling Han naturally would not agree. The other party was just worrying if Hu Niu was going to appear. Going out would really mean just delivering herself to her doorstep. He continuously comforted and eased her anxiety. The Empress also put aside their old grudges, and gave Hunyo a few words of advice, and added with bewitching Maiden Ru and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden who had come later, the four of them finally managed to temporarily convince Hunyo. Nyo is going to cultivate. Nyo is going to become a heavenly venerable tear, then beat up that old witch. Hunyo declared, her eyes red. This little girl had never liked cultivation, but now she was actually announcing such a declaration, which showed how sorrowful and furious she was. Ling Han nodded. If Hunyo could focus her grief on cultivation, that would be good, but hopefully, this matter would not have any effects on the little girl's personality, and turn an originally optimistic person into a tool that only knew revenge. He exited the Black Tower, and went into a daze. 7 years had passed, and though Shang Jiwei had still not forced him before, he had not found any means of leaving at all. It was like he would only be able to escape and leave when he advanced to Celestial King tier, and was qualified to match Shang Jiwei in speed. What was he going to do? If Hunyo could not leave the Black Tower, then it would be forever impossible for her to break through to the Immortal Palace tier. How could that be allowed? Peng, peng, peng. Just as he was feeling troubled, a knock sounded at the doors. There had been countless people who had visited him throughout these 7 years. She was presently the most important person in Shang Jiwei's eyes. Everyone wanted to develop amicable relations with him. However, he had been constantly cultivating in seclusion, so others could only be left out in the cold. And now, here was a visitor. Ling Han naturally would not be surprised. He had initially wanted to enter into the Black Tower, but thinking that since he was presently stuck in a dilemma anyways, he might as well find someone he could chat with, and find distraction from his troubles. He went to open the doors, and saw a young man standing in the doorway. When he saw Ling Han, he immediately clasped his hands in greeting, and said, "My name is Fu He, and I am Lord Lin Xian's follower." "Greetings, young Master Ling." "One of Lin Xian's men?" Ling Han naturally did not bear any positive feelings for Lin Xian, but as the saying went, one would not hit someone who smiled at you. He could not bother himself to show his displeasure to just one of his underlings, either. Thus, he smiled, and asked, "What is it?" "It's like this. A mystery realm has been newly discovered in the wide change heaven, attracting a great many prodigies and elites to adventure there. Lord Lin Xian and Lady Ran have both decided to journey there." Fu He showed a very humble attitude. "Lord Lin Xian has commanded me to come and ask if young Master Ling would be interested to go with them." Of course he was, but how could Shang Jiwei actually release him? Moreover, would Lin Xian really be that kind? He was probably planning on making a move on him in the mystery realm. Ling Han smiled slightly. "If Lin Xian can convince Aunt Wei, I would indeed like to take a look. The spiritual mountain Celestial King still has some influence on the Lady Imperial Empress. Since young Master Ling wishes to go, then Lord Lin Xian would naturally ask the spiritual mountain Celestial King to step out, and put the suggestion forward to Lady Imperial Empress," Fu He said. Ling Han was surprised. As a great, noble Celestial King, one that was at 7th heaven at that, he would actually be willing to deliberately make a trip for the sake of a minor dividing soul tear like him? It looked like the spiritual mountain Celestial King was very meticulous when it came to the matters of his disciple as well if he would actually come out in the open, and create a chance for his disciple to kill him. However, if they were really able to leave the Four Seas Palace, Ling Han would really like to grab this opportunity. He had the Black Tower, and this should only be known to Shang Jiwei. Even the spiritual mountain Celestial King did not know about the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. The matter actually progressed extraordinarily smoothly. A mere 3 days later, Manager Chen passed on a message from Shang Jiwei that he was to decide for himself whether to go to this mystery realm or not, and if he was going, there would be many dangers in the mystery realm, so he had to be extremely cautious. Chapter 2143 Another Familiar Person. Chapter 2143 Another Familiar Person. Naturally, Ling Han chose to go. Thus, when Manager Chen brought the message back from Ling Han, Shang Jiwei deliberately summoned both him and Ran. She did not speak of the matter of Hunyo at all, and merely reminded them to be especially careful, as benevolent as a mother. This caused Ran to clench her fists in anger. Initially, this had been concern and love that she enjoyed alone, yet now she had to share it with Ling Han, which made it very hard for her to accept. Fine, you have snatched what belongs to me, and I will definitely make you suffer after we enter into the mystery realm, she internally swore. And Ran, Shang Jiwei suddenly looked towards her. Master. And Ran hurriedly half-knelt. I'll entrust Ling Han to you. You must not let any harm come to him, Shang Jiwei said sternly. How could she be ignorant of this disciple's personality? Thus, she directly gave her forewarning. Ah! And Ran's mouth gaped half open. With her personality, if she were to agree, it would be absolutely impossible that she wouldn't keep her promise. Otherwise, how would she be able to call Shang Jiwei her master again? However, to ask her to tolerate Ling Han for the whole journey, and have to guarantee his safety at the same time, how could she accept that? Shang Jiwei's slender brows furrowed in a slight frown. Yes, master. And Ran nodded reluctantly. Only now did Shang Jiwei break into a smile. She glanced at Ling Han, then turned to look at An Ran, and felt that this was really a match made in heaven, causing her to involuntarily recall how she and the karmic life heavenly venerable would have been in their youth, if that be *tch, Tianyun, had not appeared. Involuntarily, her killing intent blazed. Boom, multiple depressions appeared in the palace. A storm surged out from the void, but was immediately sliced to pieces by her killing intent. When a ninth heaven celestial king raged, even the heaven and earth would be moved. Go on. She waved them off. Ling Han and An Ran quickly left, firstly because they both had thoughts on their minds, and secondly because a ninth heaven celestial king was angered, and the pressure was too heavy to stay beside her. After some slight preparations, Ling Han and the rest then set out. This time, it was the spiritual mountain celestial king leading them. It was just a few juniors going off to adventure in a mystery realm, so why was there any need to mobilize a seventh heaven celestial king? This naturally was due to Shang Jiwei's high regard. Whether it was An Ran or Ling Han, she considered them both as her own children, and naturally would not allow anything bad to happen to either of them. However, there had initially been no need for the spiritual mountain celestial king to step out for this matter personally, yet he took the initiative to take this job, so it was naturally impossible that Shang Jiwei would refuse. Thus, the spiritual mountain celestial king scooped up the three young people, and directly tore a rip into space, setting out towards the wide change heaven. A mere 5 days later, he stopped. They had already arrived at the wide change heaven. The spiritual mountain celestial king's figure slowed, and slowly advanced with the three juniors. However, celestial kings had heaven-defying power. Ling Han was obviously just using normal speed to travel, yet he still did not fall back behind An Ran and Lin Xian, far surpassing the speed that he could reach. In truth, Lin Xian and An Ran's speed was also faster than their usual rate. This was because the spiritual mountain celestial king had boosted them with a certain celestial technique, yet they did not feel anything at all, as if this was very normal. In this way, they had only spent another day to arrive at the location of that mystery realm. Ling Han's expression became strange because he knew this place. It was not that he had been here before, but rather that he had seen it on a map. After he had won the first place in the alchemy tournament, the prize was an ancient map, and it was said that there was a several 100 billion years old celestial medicine hidden in the location where the hidden treasure was shown on the map, and it was within this mystery realm. What a coincidence! This mystery realm had only appeared not too long ago. Initially, this had been a sea, but in the last few years, the sea waters rapidly evaporated, revealing a gigantic pit. Then, the pit cracked apart, revealing another world. Ling Han deliberately swept a glance over the ancient map, and discovered that there should have been a transference portal that could allow entry, but some unknown change had taken place, causing the sea waters to evaporate, and the mystery realm to reveal itself. In the skies, multiple figures streaked past, flying into the mystery realm. Ling Han looked down from his lofty position, and saw that incredibly tall trees spread as far as the eye could see. They were several thousand meters tall, and the tree leaves were thick and wide, considerably larger than even the average house. And the roars of tigers and howls of wolves could vaguely be heard from beneath them. There were also birds flying out from within. Some directly flew far away, while others would fly in a circle, and then return into the mystery realm. This is a place that has been lost since the ancient age. The spiritual mountain celestial king's eyes closed slightly, his right hand making a divination beneath his sleeve. A while later, his eyes snapped open, showing an expression of surprise. The celestial realm had existed for who knew how many epochs, but people universally called what was 10 epochs ago the ancient age, and what was 100 epochs ago would be called the primitive age. Though the spiritual mountain celestial king had attained Tao many years ago, he had only been alive for over 2 epochs, and compared to the celestial realm, that was naturally negligible. It was said that a super great war had erupted before both in the ancient age and primitive age, and a great many celestial kings had died, even ninth heaven celestial kings. Thus, when something was connected with the ancient age, even he, a seventh heaven celestial king, would be tempted. Who knew, there might be a treasure that had been left after the death of a ninth heaven celestial king that would lend him a helping hand, and help him to break through to eighth heaven? Brother spiritual mountain, a cry rang out, and a man with a thin, lanky build flew down towards them. Brother great clouds. When the spiritual mountain celestial king saw him, he offered him a smile, and even nodded in response. This thin man's body was wrapped with 8-colored celestial light, showing that he was an 8th heaven celestial king. Why would an 8th heaven celestial king be willing to treat the spiritual mountain celestial king as an equal? Naturally, it was because the spiritual mountain celestial king's battle prowess was too strong, and there was a place for him even among 8th heaven celestial kings. The great cloud celestial king waved a hand, and 5 young people instantly appeared by his side. These were the juniors that he had brought along with him using a celestial technique. Ling Han. One of the juniors spotted Ling Han, and uncontrollably called out. Ling Han naturally spotted him as well, and a rueful feeling involuntarily rose up in him. This world was actually quite small. Yulon Fenghua, the holy son of the Imperial Void Sect. Yi, going by that account, this great cloud celestial king should be a member of the Imperial Void Sect then. So it is brother Yulon, Ling Han replied with a smile. Meanwhile, Yulon Fenghua's expression was filled with shock. Previously, he had battled Ling Han, and the outcome was a tie, but Ling Han's cultivation level was lower than his by a minor level, causing his menacing killing intent to rise. He had deliberately chatted with the other party just to probe into Ling Han's background. He could confirm that Ling Han was just a lone cultivator, albeit one with heaven-defying good luck, and that was why he would have been so accomplished in cultivation. Thus, he extended an invitation to Ling Han, inviting him to the Imperial Void Sect. There, he would be able to play Ling Han easily to death. But now he had actually seen Ling Han again, and the latter was actually with the members of the Four Seas Palace. He was a member of the Four Seas Palace. He had never heard about someone like him in the Four Seas Palace. Hihi, who is this little boy, to actually be acquainted with our holy son Yulon? The great cloud celestial king swept over him, and deliberately voiced the question. That was because he was very familiar with Yulon Fenghua, and he had never seen the latter look so stunned. At least in front of a peer of equal cultivation levels, both Ling Han and Yulon Fenghua were heaven souls. Hihi, just a mere junior. The spiritual mountain celestial king sketched over the details. If Ling Han had a grudge with the Imperial Void Sect, he would not mind using them to get Ling Han killed. Thus, it was naturally impossible that he would reveal the relationship between Ling Han and Shang Jiwei. And Ran was presently angry, so she naturally would not help Ling Han explain, and it was even more so for Lin Xian. Chapter 2144 Insect Sting. Chapter 2144 Insect Sting. I had never thought that this place was actually a lost land from the ancient age. The great cloud celestial king spoke the same words as the spiritual mountain celestial king. This 8-truth spiritual beast should have long since gone extinct, right? I never imagined that I would be able to see it again here. He extended a hand carelessly, and as origin power surged, a massive beast was instantly grabbed by a colossal 8-colored hand. No matter how hard it struggled, it was all wasted effort, and when it had been dragged in front of these 2 celestial kings, it was so scared that its tail was tightly clamped between its legs. In front of this kind of high-level celestial king, No matter how untamable and wild it was, it would still instinctively feel fear. A celestial king represented the heaven and earth. Indeed, these 8 celestial patterns have been infused with 8 kinds of regulations of heaven and earth. The spiritual mountain celestial king waved a hand, and an extremely complex seal immediately appeared on that massive beast. Though the original 8-truth spiritual beast has not advanced into 9th heaven, with these 8 celestial patterns, it still practically conquered all its peers of 8th heaven. Ling Han heard this, and then sensed for himself. Involuntarily, he nodded inwardly. At present, he possessed 8 source powers of heaven and earth, but these 8 regulations were the closest to their source, so he was also most sensitive towards these 8 regulations. He could sense that there were 5 regulations on that seal that could resonate with him. Once the 8-truth spiritual beast advanced into severing mundane tier, it would grasp 8 regulations, so its battle prowess was definitely incredibly strong, and it would be a cinch for it to suppress all its peers. Initially, I had only made this trip on a spontaneous impulse due to extreme boredom, but I never thought that I would discover a lost land from the ancient age. The great cloud celestial king casually tossed the 8-truth spiritual beast away, and this giant beast hurriedly broke into a run and fled. It was practically scared out of its wits. Who knows what great fortune there would be, the spiritual mountain celestial king stated calmly, but there was a dominance in his tone that spoke of willingness to battle the heaven and earth itself. This was a way of expression, and also a kind of confidence. Even if the other was an 8th heaven celestial king, he would not give in to him or fear him. Let the juniors go for their adventure while we take a walk, all right, the great cloud celestial king asked, smiling. Sure. The spiritual mountain celestial king immediately accepted. With him and the great cloud celestial king, how would Ling Han and the rest be able to die? With a wave of his hand, the great cloud celestial king sent the 5 juniors by his side into the mystery realm, and the spiritual mountain celestial king also waved his hand, and delivered Ling Han and the others inside. They were practically right next to Yulon Fenghua and his group. The 2 celestial kings laughed, and strode off. Their target was a tall peak that pierced through the clouds in the distance. There were divine clouds immersing the skies, and possessed a primitive air. Ling Han understood inwardly. The reason that the spiritual mountain celestial king had escorted them here was not just to ensure the safety of their group, but also for the purpose of monitoring him, naturally for Hunyo's sake. How could Shang Jiwei possibly let him go so easily? And now that the spiritual mountain celestial king had left, both An Ran and Lin Xian should be taking over this duty then? In fact, the spiritual mountain celestial king still had a sliver of thought following him. Hunyo only had to appear, and this thread of thought would immediately take form, and capture Hunyo. Even a thread of thought from a celestial king could suppress ascending origin tier, and this was an unquestionable fact. Ling Han still could not let Hunyo out now, and had to find a chance to flee. He had no intention of returning to 4 Seas City. Holy Daughter An Ran, Brother Lin Xian, Yulon Fenghua and the others all greeted An Ran and Lin Xian. Previously, all of them appeared slightly reserved in the presence of celestial kings. Among these 5 of them, aside from Yulon Fenghua who was still a heaven soul, the other 4 had all advanced into the immortal palace tier, and were the other holy sons and holy daughter of the imperial void sect. However, 4 of these were men, with only 1 that was a woman. Lin Xian and An Ran clearly knew them, and greeted them back. This is, the man named Ari Kaifeng looked towards Ling Han, and showed an expression of ponderment. Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly. Ari Kaifeng responded with a reserved smile, though a hint of disdain was revealed in the corners of his lips. He was a first secret monarch tier, while the other was only a heavenly emperor. The gap in strength between the 2 of them was like the gap between heaven and earth, so he naturally disdained even talking to Ling Han. This would degrade his own status. He was not the only one, for the other 3 were the same. Their names were Lao Liang, Bi Ziwen, and Di Tongshin, respectively. They merely conversed cordially with Lin Xian and An Ran, but did not cast a second look at Ling Han. The truth was the fact that they even bothered to ask Ling Han's name was already giving him enough credit. Neither An Ran nor Lin Xian had the intention to explain who Ling Han was. The 8 of them set out, and began walking in the forest. They were not celestial kings, so how could they possibly dare to act rash in this land from the ancient age, and fly in the air without restraint? This dense forest was very dark, and the great trees were several thousand meters tall, with large, dense, thick leaves that blocked all light. Thankfully, they were all at the dividing soul tier at the very least, so this was naturally not much of a problem. Aya! Ziwen suddenly exclaimed, and stopped walking. What is it? Laro Liang asked. Ziwen raised his leg, and saw that blood was actually dripping from his foot. Everyone was stunned. Though they had not encountered enemies yet, having come to such a place, who would dare be careless? They would all definitely have covered their bodies with origin power, but Ziwen had actually bled for no reason, which both confused and shocked them. What's going on? Ziwen removed his sock and shoe, and saw that there was actually an insect sting stabbing into the sole of his left foot, exuding an eerily blue luster. It was just an insect sting, and had not been actively used. Ziwen had only stepped on it, and it had actually pierced through his shoe and sock, and penetrated his defense of origin power and regulations, stabbing into the sole of foot. Two. Ziwen's body suddenly trembled, as if he was in a sudden seizure. His eyes rolled upwards, and there was white foam gushing from the corners of his lips. Oh no, this insect sting is poisonous. With who they all were, they immediately guessed the reason. This was too terrifying, wasn't it? A great, noble immortal palace tier elite actually could not block an insect sting that had been broken off, and the strong poison had entered his body, further causing a monarch tier like Ziwen to be unable to resist it at all. Laro Liang and the others quickly took out antidote alchemical pills, and forced them into Ziwen. Not long after, Ziwen finally calmed down, but he had also passed out, releasing very deep breathing sounds. At the very least, they had finally suppressed the poison. As expected of a lost land from the ancient age, where there is danger at every step. Ari Kaifeng felt lingering fear. He, Laro Liang, and Di Tongshin were all first secret monarch tiers like Ziwen. Since Ziwen had been struck, then they definitely could not be spared, either. However, they were luckier, and had not stepped on that broken insect sting. But who knew if there would be other insect stings or something similar in this place? Meanwhile, Linghan glanced at Ziwen, and stated, "There is something off with his condition. It does not seem like the poison has been dispelled." "What do you know?" Ari Kaifeng immediately retorted. He had just spoken, and Linghan replied like this. Wasn't that just purposely undermining him? The highest change antidote pill senior brother B ingested had been personally concocted by the 4-star Grandmaster Zhongqi, capable of easily curing all poisons beneath Celestial King tier. Both Laro Liang and Di Tongshin nodded in unison. They naturally were absolutely trusting and reassured about Grandmaster Zhongqi. Ling Han's mouth twitched, and he did not speak any further. He was also a 4-star Grandmaster, all right? But since these three people did not appreciate his kindness, there was no need for him to be snubbed despite his good intentions. In any case, he was not very close with Ziwen, either, nor did they have any kind of relations, so what business was it of his whether the other man lived or died? Ziwen suddenly opened his mouth, and released a strange sound. It sounded like it had been forced out from a dead tree. When everyone's attention was drawn to him, Ziwen's eyes suddenly snapped open. The whites of his eyes had become blue, while his pupils had become deathly pale, looking horrifyingly eerie. Chapter 2145, Corroded Corpse. Chapter 2145, Corroded Corpse. The poison has really not been cured. Lin Xian deliberately laughed. Ling Han was right. Hearing these words from him, Ari Kaifeng and their group were naturally very displeased about him, but more of their antagonism was directed at Ling Han. Well, it was he that had indeed spoken such words. Naturally, the four of them thought that he was the villain. Ling Han glanced at Lin Xian. This man was really a poisonous being. This was a move to deliberately draw animosity towards him. Ziwen was moaning louder and louder, and then suddenly jumped to his feet in a bounce. His posture was extremely weird, his legs not bending, and he was just standing there as erect as a wooden stick. A spine-chilling aura exuded from those eerily pale eyes. His gaze was focused on Lao Liang, and he suddenly pounced over, opening his mouth and directing a bite at the latter's throat. "Brother B, have you gone mad?" Lao Liang hurriedly retreated. It was as if B Ziwen had indeed gone mad, his mouth releasing groans that could not be heard clearly as he continued to bite fiercely at Lao Liang. The poison in senior brother B's body has not been dispersed. It would be useless to try convincing him, we have to capture him, Ari Kaifeng called out, and was the first to make his move. Lao Liang and Di Tongshin also moved quickly, suppressing B Ziwen together, while Yulon Fenghua was only standing on the sidelines and watching the show. Though he was esteemed as the strongest holy son in the history of Imperial Void Sect, limited by his cultivation level, this was above his pay grade. The three moved together and attacked B Ziwen in unison. However, their cultivation levels and strength were close and similar with B Ziwen, so how could it be any easy matter to capture the latter? The present B Ziwen did not have any consciousness at all, and was only aware of opening his mouth and biting others. He did not recognize anyone, and had no scruples, but Ari Kaifeng and the others did not dare attack him too severely. In this manner, even if they had an advantage in numbers, the advantage would be cancelled out. "Brother Lin Xian, Holy Daughter and Ran, please help us." Di Tongshin requested assistance. Lin Xian looked towards An Ran, and the latter nodded. The two of them immediately moved, joining the battle. They were much less reserved in their attacks. So what if they wounded B Ziwen severely? He could slowly recuperate after this. Ari Kaifeng and their group could not attack conveniently, and thus did not stop An Ran and Lin Xian. On the contrary, they were responsible for restraining B Ziwen's attacks so that An Ran and Lin Xian could go all out and attack freely. Ling Han was bored, and watched the show, his arms crossed over his chest. "I had never really thought that Brother Ling would actually be a member of the Four Seas Palace." Yulon Fenghua walked over, shaking his head, and bringing a hint of rebuke in his expression. "Brother Ling, you are really too unfriendly, hiding even this from me." Ling Han chuckled, "It's a long story, and cannot be summed up in a few words. In brief, I had not deliberately meant to deceive Brother Yulon." Yulon Fenghua also smiled, his gaze flickering slightly. He was measuring his losses and gains. If he moved and got Ling Han killed, just how much trouble would it cause for himself? He thought for a moment, and an idea suddenly came to him. There was no need for him to personally move. He could borrow the help of those four senior brothers and senior sister. He was sure that Ari Kaifeng and the others were already quite displeased with Ling Han by now. Right. This had been stirred up by Lin Xian as well. Could it be that there was internal conflict within the Four Seas Palace? This could be exploited. On the other side, the five great monarch tiers moving together finally suppressed B Ziwen. After all, the present B Ziwen did not have any intelligence, and knew only to attack, so it was definite that his battle prowess would be greatly reduced. Each of the five great monarch tiers placed a restriction on B Ziwen. In this way, unless B Ziwen's strength was superior to their combined strength, it would be completely impossible for him to break out of these restrictions. "Every step is thorny," they exclaimed ruefully. They had not even taken that many steps, and already one of their numbers was down. Just how dangerous was this mystery realm? After stowing B Ziwen away into a spatial god tool, the seven of them continued their journey. This time, they had learned their lesson, keeping their feet elevated about 1 foot from the ground. In this way, there would be no need to fear that something like that insect sting would stab into the soles of their feet. They were not walking very quickly, and not long after, 9 fallen bodies appeared abruptly ahead of them. They're all dead. Judging by the extent of decomposition, they've been dead for at least several billion years. That's not right. Hasn't this mystery realm just been discovered? Furthermore, it's a lost land from the ancient age at that. How could there possibly be a corpse that is just several billion years old? They exchanged looks, and thought that there was a strangeness about this that could not be described. Could it be that several billion years ago, someone has already entered this place? That's right. It is not definite that a mystery realm has to be fully opened to allow entry. In the first place, it was already here. Someone must have accidentally barged into this space, though not a single person managed to leave alive, and that was why this place has never been discovered all this while. Logically, this could be explained. The 7 people nodded. This should be the most logical explanation. The corpses have not been touched. Judging from the look of things, internal strife should have happened among the 9 of them, and they killed each other. They continued their deductions. It is also possible that they belonged to 2 different sides, and just happened to encounter one another here, which was followed by the outbreak of battle. That's also possible. There was naturally nothing much to see about the corpses. The 7 of them very quickly resumed their advance, but they had just taken a few steps when Lao Liang suddenly exclaimed in shock, and then turned around and backtracked. "What is it?" Everyone hurriedly followed him. Not long later, Lao Liang had already returned to where the 9 corpses were laid out. He began to flip over a body, and he found a jade pendant on that body. He carefully examined it for a while, and an expression of astonishment appeared on his face. "Senior brother Lao, what is it?" Ari Kaifeng asked. At first, Lao Liang did not speak. After a while, he replied, "I know this person. His name is Yu Kai Cheng. He waved that jade pendant. And I have been the one to gift this to him too." "What?" Everyone was incredibly stunned by these words, and an intense coldness rose up in them. It should be known that Lao Liang's flame of life had only been burning for around 700 to 800 million years, but these corpses were at least several billion years old. In that case, how would Lao Liang have known this Yu Kai Cheng? Was he seeing things? "Senior brother Lao, are you sure that this person is indeed Yu Kai Cheng?" Di Tongshin asked. "Perhaps. Yu Kai Cheng has also come here, and something happened, causing him to leave his jade pendant on this corpse." "That's right. It's horribly corroded, and there is completely no way to distinguish the facial features." Lao Liang shook his head. "The jade pendant has not been dropped on this corpse, but was hidden on this corpse. Hence, this person must definitely be Yu Kai Cheng. Could it be that it was impossible that you have mistaken the jade pendant?" These words were the doubt in everyone's mind, but no one spoke it out loud. Since Lao Liang was already so sure, mentioning such words would be equivalent to slapping him in the face. Ling Han took 2 steps forwards, and carefully examined the 9 corpses. Previously, they had only been rummaging through the spatial god tools of these 9 people. There weren't any treasures inside. However, Ling Han placed his focus on their wounds this time. Insect sting. Ling Han discovered a wound on the sole of the foot of one of them, where a gleaming blue insect sting was sticking out. Everyone muttered, "Yi." It was an insect sting again. Could it be that this person had lost his senses due to the poison, and then killed all of his 8 companions, and ultimately died from the poison himself? Lao Liang continued, "Over 200 years ago, I even met Yu Kai Cheng once." His words incited even more shock from the others. Could it be that Yu Kai Cheng has also just entered this place, and died not too long ago? The natural environment here is unusual, causing a corpse that has only died several years or even several days ago to decompose so badly. Right at this moment, a corpse suddenly released a weird groan, exactly like how Biziwan had done previously. Chapter 2146 Alive. Chapter 2146 Alive. They were really seeing things. Everyone showed an alert expression, and took a few steps back as they looked towards that corpse whose foot had been wounded. It was precisely this corpse that had released that unusual groan. Teng, this corpse suddenly stood upright, its knees straight, looking incredibly bizarre. This corpse said nothing, and immediately directed a bite at Yulon Fenghua. Yulon Fenghua was just about to move when his face paled in shock. He hurriedly retreated because the other party was far stronger than himself. Humph. Ari Kaifeng smirked coldly, and moved to parry the attack. Peng. This blow from him was too terrifying. The corpse was immediately sent flying from the force. Peng, 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 it crashed through at least several hundred giant trees on its course, and only then did it finally stop. However, it had not sustained any injuries at all. Immediately, it charged back with a bounce like a sharp arrow. Yi. This time, It was Ari Kai-Feng that was looking surprised. This corpse should have been only a first secret king tier when it had been alive, and now that it was dead, its battle prowess would have become weaker. And he was a first secret mystical power, and should logically have been able to destroy this corpse with a single blow. Yet that was not what had happened. He had sent this corpse flying. It was completely no match for him, but its physique was astonishingly strong, and actually stayed undamaged. Strange, very strange. There was something strange about everything in this place. It was obvious that they had been dead for only 200 years at most, yet the decomposition of the corpses had reached an extent as if they had been dead for several billion years. And now, though the person was dead, the strength of his physique was off the charts. The extent of strangeness could not be described. That corpse charged towards them, its hands spread open. Its fingernails were long and sharp, and it turned and clawed out at Ari Kai-Feng. Ignorance. Ari Kai-Feng smirked coldly. His strength was superior to the other by who knew how many times over, and it actually dared to attack him. Peng, peng, peng. Ari Kai-Feng moved aggressively, and every blow sent that corpse flying and bouncing as if it was just a sandbag that was being beaten. But what incited fear was the fact that no matter how Ari Kai-Feng attacked it, this corpse was still undamaged, as if it had been refined into divine metal. Ling Han and the others were all wondering. Could it be that this person had focused on cultivating his physique when he had been alive? Otherwise, he had only been dead for a mere 200 years at most, so he couldn't have turned into a zombie so fast, right? But that was not definite, because this corpse seemed to have decomposed for several 100 billion years, so any kind of strange change would have been logical. It should be linked to the poison, Ling Han deduced. This poison could cause one to lose his reason and commit mindless slaughter, but perhaps it could also have a great effect on the corpse after death, such that it would become indestructible. Can we capture him and study him carefully? Lin Xian suggested. Though they still held another victim of the poison captive, Bi Ziwen clearly could not be dissected for study, so they could only take this corpse for examination. Easy. Ari Kai-Feng declared proudly. The gap in battle prowess between both sides was like a gulf. It was one matter for him to be incapable of killing the other party, but it would be incredibly easy to capture it. His hands danced, and multiple streaks of light flowed out from the tips of his fingers. Celestial light diffused, and an indescribable might exuded. He had used a celestial technique, so his battle prowess was immediately different. He aggressively suppressed it, and that corpse very soon lay subdued on the ground. It could only chaotically struggle with its arms, yet could not stand up at all. Ah! Di Tongshin suddenly grabbed her head, her eyes shedding tears of blood. What's wrong? Everyone hurriedly asked in shock. I used my divine sense to enter into this corpse, yet did not expect that there is an indescribable darkness lying within. The evil power has directly eradicated that sliver of my divine sense. Di Tongshin's pretty face was shockingly pale, and she looked endearingly pitiful. So powerful? Everyone was stunned. The battle prowess of this corpse was not all that strong, or it would not have been so easily subdued by Ari Kai-Feng, but it was actually capable of eradicating a sliver of Di Tongshin's divine sense. How was this to be believed? But would Di Tongshin joke about this kind of matter? Strange, everyone declared, but also became even more cautious. They did not dare to enter this corpse using their divine sense any longer, preferring to avoid suffering the same consequences that Di Tongshin had suffered. Monarch tiers like them were destined to reach the highest cultivation level of the celestial path, so their spirit definitely had to be complete. Even if the slightest sliver was lost, it would still have a powerful influence on their future cultivation levels. They wanted to cut open this corpse, but the battle previously had already proven that this corpse's physique was incredibly tough, and it could not be damaged through brute force or regulations. It was practically comparable to a celestial tool, so how were they supposed to deal with it? But there had to be some kind of massive secret hidden behind this corpse. If the secret that could strengthen the physique to the extent of divine metal could be uncovered, just what kind of height could that boost their own battle prowess to? When they thought about this, everyone's breathing became slightly heavy. Only Ling Han was completely unconcerned. He had cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and the toughness of his physique was something that even a reincarnated ninth heaven celestial king like Ji Wuming had to admit his inferiority in the face of. Naturally, he would not be envious of this kind of inhuman creature. What he was curious about was whether this corpse was really dead or otherwise. Ling Han drew out the divine demon sword, boosted it with the regulation of slaughter and metal, and then sliced at the corpse. Sparks erupted from the corpse, and it released a shrill, uncomfortable screech of friction, causing everyone to frown. "What are you doing?" Ari Kaifeng immediately rebuked. At first, he was already very irritated, and Ling Han actually caused such an annoying noise. Was he looking for death? Ling Han merely slanted a sideways glance at him, but did not speak. He disdained from giving any regard to this kind of idiot, who had much too high an opinion of himself, and was completely self-centered, thinking that everyone should listen to him. Just go to hell. Seeing that Ling Han had actually ignored him, Ari Kaifeng immediately flew into a rage. They had just entered the mystery realm, and one of their companions had gone mad, so they could only subdue him forcefully. And now, they had encountered this kind of mystifying, bizarre happening, causing him to become easily angered and hot-tempered. "Do you think I do not dare to touch you?" Ari Kaifeng threatened sinisterly. His strength was completely superior to Ling Han's, and in terms of background, the Imperial Void Sect was also a ninth heaven celestial king level force, and the sealed emotion palace that backed them was a heavenly venerable tier level force that had even surpassed ninth heaven celestial king tier. Thus, he could be completely unreserved in his actions as long as he was just a little bit in the right. Hee. Ling Han only chuckled. He had used the source power of slaughter, and 4 leaves fluttered lightly. They were obviously extremely fragile, seeming as if they could be blown over by just a breeze, yet could burst out with destructive power that was capable of slicing apart the dome of heaven. He once more delivered a slash towards the corpse. He was sure that there would be extraordinary effects from this now because his own physique was the same. A direct attack would be completely ineffective, and one could only use the power of regulation to slowly kill him. "You're looking for death." Ari Kaifeng roared in fury. Not only did this brat completely ignore him, he even actually dared to disobey him, and still planned to mess around with that corpse. Wasn't this just deliberately opposing him? Even if he couldn't kill Ling Han, he was determined to teach this guy a harsh lesson. Boom, he moved aggressively, and shot out a punch. Like a god of fire displaying his might, flames filled the skies. Though Ran was internally extremely displeased, since she had promised her respected master that she would take care of Ling Han, she could only suppress her own displeasure at this time. With a leap, she stood in front of Ling Han, and then stretched out her hand to parry the blow. Peng! Energy surged out madly, and the regulations of the Great Tao clashed, bursting out with soaring flames and light. Ran was completely unmoved, but Ari Kaifeng took a consecutive 7 steps back as a streak of blood gushed from the palm of his hand. "Holy daughter Ran, what is the meaning of this?" Ari Kaifeng demanded in displeasure, and felt a sliver of wariness as well. Though he was a monarch tier himself, Ran was a monarch among monarchs, and possessed the strength to suppress him. Chapter 2147, Blood Insect. Chapter 2147, Blood Insect. Ran naturally was very unwilling to step out for Ling Han, but Shang Jiwei had issued a strict command to her, and how could she possibly dare to disobey the command of her master? She could ignore anyone in this world, but the only one she did not dare and could not disobey was Shang Jiwei. The debt of raising her, the kindness of teaching her was like the heaven and earth for her. She only looked calmly at Ari Kaifeng, and said, "I will not interfere at other times, but this time, no one is allowed to touch a single hair on his head, or that would mean becoming enemies with me." "Holy daughter Ran, you are so mighty." Laro Liang exclaimed coldly, sinister killing intent seeping from him. Though he was only an ordinary monarch tier as well, how could he allow his morale to weaken when he originated from the Imperial Void Sect? Unfortunately, though Yulon Fenghua was also a top-tier monarch tier, he was only a heaven soul at present. Without advancing into the Immortal Palace tier, how could he possibly compare to Ran? "Then we'll just go all out in battle. Whom would I be afraid of?" Ran was extremely assertive. That was the type of woman she was. Everyone, Everyone, please calm your anger. Lin Xian stepped out as mediator. His aim was to incite the members of the Imperial Void Sect to target Ling Han, but he absolutely did not have the slightest intention for Enran to also be dragged in. Furthermore, he had not thought that Enran would actually step out for Ling Han's sake, either, which made him feel slightly puzzled. Yi, look! Di Tongxin suddenly exclaimed. She was pointing at that corpse. Everyone turned their eyes in that direction, and saw that a slight bit of the corpse had actually been cut from the strike delivered by Ling Han's sharp blade. This portion was the wound on the sole of the foot of the corpse that had been pierced by the insect sting. Initially, the wound had already scabbed over, and now it had once again been sliced open. Ari Kaifeng instantly appeared slightly embarrassed. The reason for him making a move on Ling Han was that the latter was causing trouble for no reason, and causing an irritating noise. But he had not thought that the latter was not just messing around, but had really cut open this corpse. This was equivalent to slapping him in the face. What he had not managed to do, Ling Han had successfully accomplished. What a joke. The other was merely a heaven soul. No matter how overbearing Ari Kaifeng was, he could say nothing at this point. He shut his mouth tightly, yet the killing intent in his heart was bubbling to its pinnacle. He could not tolerate anyone that dared to embarrass him. Yet Ling Han did not take it to heart at all. At present, Ari Kaifeng was indeed stronger than him, but that was only true for the present. He only had to advance into the Immortal Palace tier, and he would be able to suppress Ari Kaifeng with a flip of his hand. His concentration was completely focused on that corpse. As the divine demon's sword sliced continuously, the wound was also endlessly deepening and growing larger. Finally, some clues could be perceived. Gasp! The others were only looking, and when they saw clearly, they couldn't help but inhale sharply. Within that wound, there were actually multiple tiny insects squirming. These insects were only the size of a rice grain, and were blood red in color. It was unknown whether they had been of this color in the first place, or if they had been dyed red by blood. However, while these bugs were tiny, they exuded an incredibly evil air, inciting an extreme feeling of disgust just upon first sight. Ling Han was shocked. This kind of disgust did not originate from himself, but was rather an indescribable feeling. He just felt disgusted, and there was no reason for it. This was a hatred originating from the heavenly Tao, similar to that caused by the cultivators of the other cultivation system. The tiny insects were the same. Ling Han was not very sure. There was a large disparity between these insects and the cultivators of the other cultivation system that he had come into contact with, but there was a similar stink to them, which was indeed strange. What was stranger was the fact that this wound that had been sliced open was actually squirming, as if it had gained consciousness, and wanted to heal the wound. Humph! Laro Liang smirked coldly, and swiped out a finger, slicing towards that wound. He could not damage that corpse, but now that there was a wound, how could it be that he would still be unable to? As the finger swiped out, the regulations of the Great Tao turned into a blade that slashed onto these insects. These insects released a sharp cry, being forcibly crushed into dust by the power of regulation. And when these insects were dead, the squirming of the wound immediately stopped, as if it had suddenly lost all life. Everyone sighed in relief. It looked like the mutation of the corpse was because of these insects. Thankfully, though the corpse could be considered indestructible, these insects could be easily killed. However, everyone's optimism immediately disappeared without a trace, because new insects were crawling out very soon, and the wound that had stopped recovering was once again squirming. Could it be that this corpse was filled entirely with insects? These insects were strange creatures of this place, crawling into this corpse and causing havoc, or was it merely because of that insect sting? If it was the former scenario, there were really thorns all over this place, and they had to be extremely cautious. And if it was the latter case, that would be even more terrifying. It was just a single insect sting, so how could it have possibly transmitted these creatures? And this insect sting had clearly been broken off, so how terrifying would the owner be? Previously, Laro Liang and the others had already said that the alchemical pill that Bi Ziwen had ingested could heal the powerful poison of anything below Celestial King tier, but the result was the complete opposite. So what did that mean? This poison was of the celestial king tier. Could it be that an insect that had ascended Tao and become a celestial king had died here, its corpse scattered throughout this mystery realm? With the strength of a celestial king, even a part that had been dropped from his body, even when who knew how many billions and billions of years had passed, would still possess the ability to easily destroy the defenses of an immortal palace tier. This land of the ancient age could possibly contain an astonishing secret, and Ran said, a hint of excitement flashing over her face. The more dangerous it was, the more she longed for it, because danger also accompanied great fortune. Everyone nodded in unison, but it was not just the few of them that were here. There were also colossal beings like celestial kings. If there really was any great fortune, then the chance of them obtaining it was astonishingly slim. However, something like great fortune would have to depend on your own fate and good luck in the first place. It did not mean that just because one was stronger, one would definitely obtain it. Because Ling Han had not suppressed the wound of the corpse very soon recovered. This corpse also released groaning sounds, wanting to climb back to its feet. Refine him with the power of regulations. Everyone made their move, using the regulations of heaven and earth to refine the corpse. At this, the corpse finally stopped releasing any human-like noises, but rather issued the hum of insects, which was incredibly shrill. The corpse suddenly exploded into a shower of blood, and then countless blood insects flew out. It was precisely the disgusting creatures that they had previously seen. They danced all over the skies, unleashing their attacks towards Ling Han and the others. Inconceivable. That corpse was clearly extremely tough, and could not be damaged through pure force. It could only be refined through the use of regulations, yet now it had suddenly exploded, as if that was just a pile of ordinary flesh and blood. It was all because of those blood insects. Blood insects surged out like a hurricane, and assaulted Yulon Fenghua first. Yulon Fenghua was enraged. Why did these insects attack him first? Could it be that they thought that he was the weakest? That was indeed the case. Though he was a super monarch tier, and Ran, Laro Liang, and the others were all at first secret, so they naturally overwhelmed him completely, and though Ling Han was also a heaven soul, he was a freak on the level of Jiwuming, and was also more powerful. Thus, this flock of insects attacked Yulon Fenghua first. 3,000 karmic flames, he roared. Boom, a fierce flame immediately surged from his body, burning endlessly. This was a celestial technique that he had newly learned. He could only use it once he had reached Heaven's Soul, and its might was truly terrifying. Multiple seals of great Tao leapt, feeling as if it was capable of melting even pseudo-divine metal into liquid metal. Instantly, large masses of insects were killed, but even more insects were charging over. Chapter 2148, Going Separate Ways. Chapter 2148, Going Separate Ways. Laro Liang and the others naturally wouldn't just sit by and watch. They each sent out a palm strike, and resolved the danger for Yulon Fenghua. Boom, the swarm of insects instantly died by the masses. When they entered into a human body, they would be able to turn a corpse incredibly tough, but they themselves were extremely fragile and weak. Facing a first secret monarch tier, they had completely no power to resist. Xiao, a blood insect the size of a fist, charged out suddenly from the swarm of insects. Its mouthpart was an extremely sharp sting, and it rapidly pounced on Yulon Fenghua. Mother insect. The insect queen. Everyone exclaimed loudly. Though the names were all different, the only thing that could be confirmed was that this insect should be a being like a queen bee, and was the leader of the whole swarm. And Ran moved. With only a flick of a slender finger, an ice spike shot out like a sharp sword, and pierced that mother insect, nailing it to the trunk of a tree. The mother insect's tail waved a few times, and all its movements very soon stopped. It had finally died. With its death, the swarm of insects that were still dancing in the air immediately dropped in unison, their corpses scattered all over the ground. It looked like not only was the mother insect leading the whole swarm of insects, it was even their source of life. The moment it died, everything would be finished. Finally settled. So troublesome. To kill these insects, it was necessary to first kill the host that they were living off of, and refine it through the power of regulation, forcing the insect swarm to appear, and then kill the mother insect. Only then would one be able to completely kill them off. They all wanted to know something. What if the person that had been hit was a 4th secret or 5th secret elite, or ascending origin tier? Then they would only be able to flee in the face of that kind of opponent. But this kind of worry could not deter their determination to advance at all. The more dangerous it was, the higher the chances that an astonishing treasure could be gained. Meanwhile, Ling Han secretly drew out that old map and surveyed it. This was definitely not something as simple as just a drawing, but rather was a precious item that had been created with considerable effort. For example, when Ling Han had been outside, the map only showed the landscape of the celestial realm. However, after entering here, the map automatically enlarged, showing the conditions of the area around where Ling Han was presently at. When he inserted his divine sense, a 3-dimensional map could even appear in his mind, and he could see every single detail extremely clearly. Of course, this map had been created who knew how many years ago, and it was possible that great changes had also taken place here, and it might have become completely different from what it had been all those years ago. Yet Ling Han was more inclined towards the idea of there being no change, or only very small changes. This place should be a place that was completely cut off from the rest of the world. If changes had only taken place internally, the changes should be limited. He studied the map carefully. They were presently in a dense jungle, and if they continued onwards, there would be a great mountain, which would be followed by a lake, but the map did not show what lay behind the lake. Possibly, he would have to walk further ahead for the map to show further details. Because the map had been enlarged, there were even more details, but correspondingly, the macroscopic aspect would become smaller. There was an arrow on the map, indicating that Ling Han had to continue walking onwards. Because they now knew how frightening the insect sting was, they became even more cautious as they journeyed onwards, and they also saw even more corroded corpses. They had discovered some a bit too late, and were attacked by the corpses. However, they only wasted a little time to refine the corpses, and force out the insect swarms, which they killed. Some they discovered earlier, and managed to circle around them in time, avoiding a battle. Their luck was not too bad, as they had not encountered 4th secret, 5th secret, or even ascending origin tier victims. Otherwise, they would only be capable of fleeing in panic. Actually, Ling Han hoped that they would encounter such existences. In that way, he would be able to take advantage of the opportunity, and split off from Ran and the rest, creating an opportunity for himself to sneak off. Over a dozen days later, they finally exited the dense jungle. A steep peak that pierced directly into the clouds appeared ahead of them. Divine clouds entwined around it like it was the finger of a celestial king, exuding a boundless intimidating pressure. There must be a precious treasure on this mountain, Ari Kaifeng declared decisively. Ian, we need to explore the mountain. Lin Xian expressed his agreement. Then, let's go. Yet Ling Han did not move a single step. Shaking his head, he said, I have no interest in climbing the mountain. The map was pointing straight ahead all this while, and previously, the 2 great celestial kings, Great Cloud Celestial King and Spiritual Mountain Celestial King, had both come here. Even if they considered the treasure here beneath them, there were still other ascending origin tier elites. Furthermore, the celestial kings that had come here were not just limited to the 2 of them. If there really was some kind of treasure on the mountain, how could a dividing soul tier like himself possibly be capable of taking his share of the loot? Boom! On the peak, there would occasionally be dazzling flashes of light flickering. That was a battle on the level of ascending origin tier, at least, and that could be perceived from the seals of Great Tao. Brat, I was not asking for your opinion, Ari Kaifeng retorted menacingly. He only felt furious Ling Han was again opposing him. I said that there was treasure on the mountain, and wanted to climb the mountain, yet you say you're not interested. What are you trying to say here? Lin Xian was also displeased. Ling Han, what is your cultivation level? Since we have decided to climb the mountain, what right do you have to refuse? It can't be that you're afraid, right? Haha, without even the courage to seize food from the tiger's mouth, your accomplishments will be limited as well. If you're so capable, just try and defeat an ascending origin tier, Ling Han casually retorted. Absolute nonsense. Lin Xian humphed. Ling Han crossed his arms over his chest. I dare to say that I can take over a dozen blows from an immortal palace tier, but would you dare to take over a dozen blows from an ascending origin tier? Everyone would be challenging an opponent that was a major tier superior, which was relatively fair. Lin Xian couldn't help but feel embarrassed, and could not talk back, either. Ling Han was just a freak, remaining completely unscathed even after taking 2 consecutive blows from An Ran, but if it was Lin Xian, any ascending origin tier would be able to insta-kill him. How was he supposed to talk back? Ari Kai Feng and the others were stunned. Ling Han could really endure over a dozen strikes from an immortal palace tier? Wasn't that a joke? The immortal palace tier would completely crush the dividing soul tier, and this was an iron rule that anyone would know. It was a truth of the world. I don't want to go up the mountain, either, An Ran said. You guys can go on ahead, and I'll leave with Ling Han. I'll go with you, Lin Xian quickly declared. How could he possibly be willing to separate from An Ran? And it was even less possible that he would be willing to provide a chance for An Ran and Ling Han to be alone. If so, we'll go our separate ways for now. Di Tongshin smiled slightly. Sister An Ran, take care. An Ran nodded. She was not particularly skilled in socializing. Lin Xian, meanwhile, was an expert in making connections. After chatting for a good while with the 4 members of the Imperial Void Sect, he finally waved them goodbye, and walked next to An Ran. Ling Han secretly complained about his misfortune. There were still 2 tagalongs with him. How was he supposed to throw them off his tail? Let's go, An Ran stated coldly. She was already getting impatient from waiting. The 3 of them advanced, circling directly around the tall mountain, and a narrow, long lake appeared ahead of them. Though it was described as narrow, that was only speaking in relative terms when compared to its length. In fact, the width of this lake had reached several tens of thousands of meters, and large fishes could occasionally be seen leaping out of the waters, creating waves that were as tall as several hundred meters. But an eagle streaked past, and easily caught such a large fish, leaving with a flap of its wings. The weak would be prey for the strong. This was the law of the jungle. This place is even more dangerous, An Ran stated calmly, though there was a strong caution in her tone. Ling Han nodded inwardly because that giant fish was shockingly at the ascending origin tier. With a hua, the lake waters split apart, and a colossal creature climbed out of the lake and onto the banks. It was shaped like a crocodile, but only had 3 legs, 1 in front and the other 2 at the back. Its tail was wide and thick, and it was covered with scales that looked like black iron, sharp as saws. This was not the most frightening part. What was terrifying was the aura that was released by this crocodile. 5th secret. Lin Xian immediately exclaimed, his eyes narrowing slightly. Chapter 2149, Three-Legged Crocodile. Chapter 2149, Three-Legged Crocodile. Lin Xian was a monarch tier, and could be invincible even with a superior gap of 2 minor levels. Thus, not only was he capable of overwhelming ordinary 3rd secrets, he could manage a battle even against ordinary 4th secrets. At least, he would be able to retreat safely. However, against a 5th secret, his only course was to die in defeat. Not just him, even An Ran, who was a super monarch tier, could not possibly be the match for a 5th secret elite. Thus, when this colossal creature appeared, Lin Xian and An Ran were naturally both astounded. They could not afford a battle, and forceful confrontation would result in definite death. Their only option was to run. This 3-legged crocodile immediately charged over, opening its ferocious mouth as it bit towards Ling Han and the others. Run! An Ran exclaimed, and as her figure leapt, she did not forget to grab out at Ling Han. She had not forgotten Shang Jiwei's words that she was to protect Ling Han. Lin Xian saw this happen, and instantly went mad with jealousy. He naturally was unaware of Shang Jiwei's command, and merely thought that An Ran was concerned about Ling Han. Naturally, his flames of jealousy burned brightly, wanting nothing more than to tear Ling Han into pieces. Ling Han's physique was incredibly tough, but in terms of battle prowess, he was naturally no match for a 1st secret monarch tier. Thus, An Ran naturally grabbed him easily, and he could not resist in the slightest. Xiao and Ran used a movement technique, as quick as light. Lin Xian followed closely behind, his eyes glowering at Ling Han, not bothering to hide his killing intent in the slightest. Ling Han saw this, and felt slightly gloomy. I have no wish to have a woman grab me like this, either, firstly because it's embarrassing, and secondly, how am I supposed to run like this? If Lin Xian knew the complaint that Ling Han was thinking, he would definitely be even angrier. Wasn't this just refusing to admit that he had received a benefit? And Ran and Lin Xian ran, and the three-legged crocodile pursued them. Its 3 legs stomped, yet did not touch the ground at all. It was as if the air had become the sea, and it could swim freely in the air. However, if the major tier was close enough, the speed of cultivators was actually more or less the same, unless the regulations they cultivated were specialized in fleeing. For example, the regulations of lightning, the regulations of space. Of course, not all regulations of lightning and regulations of space were specialized in speed. However, it just so happened that this 3-legged crocodile was specialized in the regulations of lightning, and regulations that were inclined towards speed at that. As its 3 legs paddled, flashes of lightning flickered behind it, causing it to burst out with astonishing speed. It had clearly started off later, and there was still a great distance between it and Ling Han's group, but as it pursued, it was rapidly shortening the distance between the two sides. We can't throw it off, let's battle. And Ran declared resolutely. If they encountered another 5th secret or even ascending origin tier demonic beast at this moment, then they would really be dead. All right. Lin Xian was also a monarch tier, so he naturally did not lack fighting spirit. The two of them stood firm, and Ran casually tossed Ling Han to the side. Then, a mirror appeared in her hands. It appeared to be quite similar to the Great Sun Heavenly King mirror. This was a replica at the Immortal Palace tier. Wang, the precious mirror replica shone, shooting out streaks of light. Some shone on Ran, while others fell on the 3-legged crocodile, and the effects produced were completely different. Those that landed on Ran boosted her battle prowess, while it seriously weakened the battle prowess of the 3-legged crocodile. Even against a 5th secret elite, this could still be extraordinarily effective. Peng! Ran charged towards the 3-legged crocodile, and exchanged a blow with this colossal creature. However, she immediately became a streak of light as she was heavily sent flying backwards. Even if her own battle prowess had been boosted, while her opponent's had been decreased, there was a total gap of 4 minor levels between the two sides, and how could it simply be compensated just because a monarch tier now had the use of a precious tool? She was still no match. Lin Xian hurriedly approached. Meanwhile, he had summoned a long spear, and as he brandished it, it was like a green dragon had risen from the sea, releasing multiple roars of a dragon. This was also a pseudo-celestial tool, and had incredible might. Unfortunately, that 3-legged crocodile was too strong. Merely with a sweep of its tail, it sent Lin Xian flying backwards. However, Ran had also charged back, and restrained this 3-legged crocodile, not giving it the chance to hunt Lin Xian down. The two of them battled in this manner. Taking it in turns, they would restrain the 3-legged crocodile. Though they were at a complete disadvantage in this situation, if the 3-legged crocodile did not manage to succeed even after a long battle, it would probably retreat on its own discreetly. Ling Han watched for a while, and knew that Ran's safety was assured. Furthermore, with the fact that Shangji Wei was willing to let her come out, the former most probably had bestowed on her some kind of super treasure, though its use would be limited, or she would have to pay a great sacrifice for its use. His feelings towards Shangji Wei were very conflicted. He was furious that she had killed Long Yueshi, but at the same time, the concern that Shangji Wei showed him was genuine, and made him feel slightly touched as well. Thus, he was also concerned for this disciple of Shangji Wei. When he was sure that she would be fine, he smiled, and said, "I would not be of help even if I stayed, so I won't stay around to be a hindrance. I'll leave first." Saying this, he broke into a run and fled. "Stand right there." Ran exclaimed furiously. Aside from agreeing to protect Ling Han, she had also been assigned another mission, and that was not to let Ling Han out of her sight. There was a person inside his spatial god tool that her master was determined to kill. She did not know why Shang Jiwei had not simply used brute force with her astonishing strength, but since Shang Jiwei had said so, she had to fulfill the mission fully. When a woman had a job, they would sometimes disregard all consequences completely. She suddenly turned and left, setting off in pursuit of Ling Han. Lin Xian was astounded. How could he possibly be capable of blocking a 5th secret tier immortal beast on his own? Peng. He had barely even finished the thought when he was struck by a sweep of the three-legged crocodile's tail, and had been sent flying who knew how far. Thankfully, the three-legged crocodile had not set off to pursue him, but rather switched its target to Ling Han and ran. To be more accurate, it was Ling Han that it was targeting because it could sense that there was something that it needed within Ling Han's body. Source power of heaven and earth. Ran's figure shot forwards furiously, quickly shortening the distance between herself and Ling Han. Just when it looked like he was about to surpass the maximum limit of Ran's assault range, Ling Han immediately cast void space. Space warped, and innumerable mirrors appeared. It seemed like he was everywhere. If this was any other time, Ran naturally could easily move to crush all the mirror images. Then, there would be nowhere for Ling Han to hide, and he could only be captured by her. However, presently, there was still an immortal beast at the 5th secret chasing behind her, so what time would she have to make a move? She could only wait, but the three-legged crocodile was rapidly catching up to her. With a sweep of its tail, endless energy swept out madly, and those mirror images were instantly shattered. Yi, where was Ling Han? Ran involuntarily frowned. She had been waiting for Ling Han's true self to appear, but under the sweep of the three-legged crocodile's tail, all the mirror doppelgangers were already destroyed, yet there was still no trace of Ling Han. How could someone completely disappear like that? A spatial god tool? She had not considered this possibility at all, unless it was a spatial god tool that a celestial king had forged from divine metal that should be considered a spatial celestial tool then. Otherwise, no spatial god tool could possibly hold up to this kind of blast. Because a spatial god tool could only be forged from level 20 godly metal, and could not be forged from pseudo-divine metal, the godly metal that overlapped would cause spatial effects, and could not possibly be successfully forged. And using divine metal to forge a spatial celestial tool was much too luxurious. Even with the wealth of the Four Seas Palace, they could not afford if there were so many celestial kings waiting to use divine metal to forge celestial tools. Then where was Ling Han? Even if he had been killed with the strike from the three-legged crocodile, there should still have been some scraps left, and there should have been shattered pieces of his spirit as well. How strange. However, after the three-legged crocodile faltered for a moment, it then unleashed a fierce assault against her. Chapter 2150, Almost Insta-Killed. Chapter 2150, Almost Insta-Killed. With the attack of a strong enemy, Ran naturally did not have the leisure to search for Ling Han's whereabouts, or think about exactly where the latter had gone. As she battled, she retreated, fleeing off farther and farther. I finally tossed her off my back. Ling Han came out of the Black Tower, and breathed a long sigh of relief. Now, he was really free to go anywhere he wanted. Yi. His brow immediately furrowed in a frown as he sensed a familiar aura was rapidly rushing towards him. Ling Han. Lin Xian released a furious roar, and he charged over from a distance. With him stabbing his spear into the air in front of him, suddenly the force of the spear took shape, and shot towards Ling Han like a sharp arrow. As this spear attack swept past, the ground around him all cracked, showing how frightening this blow was. Or was it rather that the surroundings of this place were extraordinarily sturdy? Otherwise, with such a sweeping blow from a first secret monarch tier, this place would have long since been turned into a great pit that was as deep and wide as an ocean. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then did not enter into the Black Tower. Instead, he turned around and ran. To enter into the Black Tower whenever he got into trouble was not advisable. Can you run? Lin Xian smirked coldly, pursuing him relentlessly. Ling Han laughed loudly, and drew out the divine demon sword. He turned around and delivered a slash, the sword chi alarming. Even if Lin Xian was a first secret monarch tier, he did not dare allow this strike to land on him. However, his strength was too powerful. He merely clenched his fist and shot out a punch, and this streak of sword chi was shattered, and his speed only paused for just a slight moment. Just how wide was the gap in speed between the immortal palace tier and dividing soul tier? Lin Xian quickly closed the distance between the two of them. His right hand wielded the spear, while his left hand was free as he blasted out an attack at Ling Han. At present, his jealousy was on full throttle, and there was no one around, either. Even if he killed Ling Han, there would be no one who would know. He could just blame it on those ferocious beasts. What would it have to do with him? Die. A vicious light flashed through Ling Han's eyes as well. He actually turned against the flow, and greeted Lin Xian's attack head-on. Peng! The force of the punch reached him. This was a blow that could break 4-star pseudo-divine metal from its force, but when it landed on Ling Han, it did not cause any kind of damage, and only sent Ling Han flying backwards. Wang, wang, wang. Void space unfolded, and Ling Han switched out. Immediately, he appeared behind Lin Xian, and sent out his own punch. Ha 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 ha, I have already seen this move before. Do you think I will have no precautions in place? Lin Xian countered with a smirk. He sent out his spear in a reverse stab. It was fast, accurate, vicious, and ruthless, showing fully the strength he possessed as a monarch tier. Ling Han was neither angered nor shocked, and was presently gathering momentum for a superstorm. Great Clash of Source Powers. The Great Clash of Source Powers was created from combining 5 source powers of heaven and earth, so how great would its might be? It was enough to explode a hole in the void. Immediately, Lin Xian paled in great shock. This attack was so terrifying that it was completely unimaginable to him. He admitted that Ling Han was very strong, being capable of sustaining a few blows from even a first secret monarch tier, but he absolutely did not think that Ling Han's battle prowess could actually threaten him. But when this attack was launched, he immediately sensed that if he was hit, he would be dead beyond a doubt. But he had underestimated his enemy too far. Yes, he knew that Ling Han's physique was astonishingly tough, and also knew that the latter possessed an ability allowing instant movement. Thus, this counter from Ling Han was completely within his expectations. However, precisely because of this, he had been careless, because he had not taken Ling Han's strength to heart at all. Thinking of dodging only now? How could that be? Boom, a great explosion took place in the air, and the area within the surrounding 5 kilometers was completely flattened. However, when the storm of energy stopped, Lin Xian was still standing, and there was a seal with an indescribable shape flickering behind him, exuding a supreme aura. The seal bestowed by a celestial king had just managed to block that fatal blow. As expected, though the spiritual mountain celestial king had left, how could he be completely unprepared? With the protective regulations personally bestowed by a 7th heaven celestial king, even an ascending origin tier could not possibly kill Lin Xian. Of course, now that the celestial king tier seal had been used, its power would begin to disappear. Thus, this was a last resort to save his life, and could not be used easily. Lin Xian stared at Ling Han in shock, his face bearing an expression of absolute disbelief. He, a monarch tier of his era, a great and noble immortal palace tier, had actually almost been killed by a mere heaven soul, and it would be an insta-kill at that. He was still blowing his own trumpet. If he had not been given a power boost from the spiritual mountain celestial king, how could he possibly be exclaiming in shock at this moment? This person was too dangerous. Lin Xian's expression was filled with shock, but the killing intent in his heart had already reached a point of no return. At this moment, no matter who appeared, no one would be able to stop him from killing Ling Han. Without killing this brat, he would not be able to rest or eat in peace. Die. He charged out once more, but since he now knew that Ling Han had such a frightening deadly move, he naturally had prepared himself as well. If he made the same mistake twice, he would not deserve the name of a monarch tier. Of course, Ling Han sent out another strike of Great Clash of Source Powers, yet Lin Xian managed to leap away in time, and left the attack range of this move far behind him. What's wrong, not daring to take the blow? Ling Han grinned widely. I have taken all your strikes head-on, yet you don't dare to face my attacks head-on. What kind of immortal palace tier are you? Fuck, it's not me that is weak here, but rather that you are too freakish. What dividing soul tear's attack could penetrate the defenses of an immortal palace tear, and pose a threat to the latter? And how many dividing soul tears would have defenses that could hold up to even the attack of an immortal palace tear? Ling Han was the only one. How could there be such a freak in this world? And Lin Xian could not retort, either. It was indeed he, an immortal palace tear, that was dodging, and not daring to face Ling Han's strike head-on. He was really going to kill himself with his depression. Die. 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 Lin Xian had learned his lesson, and did not approach Ling Han further. Instead, he delivered his attacks from a distance. He was superior to Ling Han by a major tier, and even if there was such a wide distance between them, he could still pose a massive threat to Ling Han with such long-distance attacks. On the other side, Ling Han's great clash of source powers was limited by distance, and could no longer become a threat to Lin Xian. In this manner, Ling Han was instantly in a crisis. Ling Han no longer lingered in battle. The great clash of source powers could only be an unexpected move, and if he could not deal with his opponent with a single blow, he would have no further chances afterwards. If he still had another source power of heaven and earth, he could just enter into the Black Tower, and directly cultivate to the consummate level of dividing 9 souls before coming back out. By then, he would be equivalent to the first secret immortal palace tier, and he would then be able to turn around and oppress Lin Xian as easily as mowing down weeds. Still trying to escape? No way. Lin Xian set off in pursuit. There was absolutely no way he was going to let his opponent leave. Today, Ling Han definitely had to die. Ling Han ignored him completely, and only used his movement technique, moving as fast as lightning. Lin Xian used all the means at his disposal, but Ling Han's methods of ensuring his own safety were varied and plentiful. Void space allowed him to have thousands and thousands of mirror images, while the indestructible Heaven Scroll allowed him to sustain attacks that were above his limits. When the indestructible True Fluid channeled, he could instantly return back to the prime of his health from a near-death state. One pursued, while the other fled. 7 days passed, and Lin Xian couldn't help but feel shocked. In such a long time, he actually failed to capture a mere heaven soul. His killing intent burned even brighter, while he was also filled with curiosity about Ling Han. This person had to have some massive secret to him, or how could he possibly be so freakish? He would kill this guy, and snatch his great fortune for himself. Thus, he strengthened his resolution. He had completely dismissed the idea of seeking the treasure that was possibly within this mystery realm from his mind, and focused on pursuing Ling Han. He was sure that if he captured Ling Han, his gains would surpass all else. Another half-month later, an unknown coldness suddenly rose up in Lin Xian. A blood-red fog was wafting right ahead, and this filled him with endless chills. Involuntarily, he stopped moving. If he chased into this fog, he would definitely die. This was his instinctive feeling. Chapter 2151, Celestial King Tear Skin? Chapter 2151, Celestial King Tear Skin? Ling Han naturally was not just running around randomly. Actually, he had been checking that old map all this while, and going in the direction indicated by the arrow. A swamp had appeared ahead of him, and a blood-red mist was wafting right above the swamp, causing an instinctive coldness to rise up within him. That substance could not be touched, or even one with his physique would be instantly turned into bones. He did not know why he would have this kind of instinctive feeling, but did not doubt it in the slightest. However, right at this moment, the ancient map suddenly released a sliver of intent within Ling Han's mind for him to continue onwards. What? Wasn't this just a map? How could it possibly release mental intent? Ling Han suddenly realized that he had underestimated the value of this map. In fact, all the people of the ancient Alchemy Tower had also made an error in judgment. The value of this map far surpassed their estimations. An inconceivable trust led Ling Han into choosing not to stop, but rather forge on ahead bravely. He drew out the ancient map, and saw that this map was exuding a blazing light, but upon closer look, he discovered that this light was actually originating from the backside of the ancient map. Because Lin Xian had ceased his pursuit, Ling Han had the time to take out the ancient map and study it closely. He flipped the map over, and saw that there was an ancient seal on the backside of the old map, and it was this seal that was glowing, exuding supreme celestial might, and blocking the surging blood mist. Yee, so weird. A strange feeling suddenly rose up in Ling Han. While he had never seen this seal before, it felt familiar to him. Xiao Ji Yu. Right, it was precisely Xiao Ji Yu. Ling Han suddenly recalled that this seal was astonishingly of the same trend as the bone seals on Xiao Ji Yu. Even if he had not reached this kind of level, he could still confirm that there was a strong link between the two. He flipped through the ancient map closely, and the shock in his expression became more and more pronounced. This was human skin, celestial king tier skin. He had a guess. Years ago, a supreme existence had died, and a single bone had turned into Xiao Ji Yu, while his human skin had been made into this ancient map. Xiao Ji Yu had been a ninth heaven celestial king in the past, and who could be able to make his human skin into a map? A heavenly venerate. Ling Han couldn't help but moan secretly about the misfortune. If the ancient map had long since shown these strange signs, he might have communicated with Xiao Ji Yu long ago, and perhaps he would have gotten some answers. However, now that the human skin was glowing, it protected Ling Han as he continuously advanced. The blood mist could not attack him, and it was as if he was walking on flat ground. Damn it! Damn it! Lin Xian roared furiously. Even he did not dare enter this kind of blood mist, but Ling Han was walking like he was on flat ground. This naturally had to be because there was a shocking treasure in Ling Han's possession that could resist the corrosion of the blood mist, and this made him feel even greater envy. Just how many treasures were there in Ling Han's possession? Just when it looked like Ling Han's figure was about to disappear, Lin Xian could no longer hold himself back. He took a step towards the blood mist, wanting to use the Celestial King tier seal to resist the blood mist, and then seek Ling Han out and kill him. Yet he had just taken one step when he saw that the Celestial King tier seal immediately released blazing light, but the blood mist surged, continuously barraging the light, and causing it to rapidly dim. What? Lin Xian almost exclaimed in shock. The method that had been arranged by a seventh heaven celestial king was actually so ineffective. Just what kind of damn thing was this blood mist? Could it be that it was ninth heaven celestial king tier in level? It should be known that the spiritual mountain celestial king was no ordinary seventh heaven elite, but was capable of ranking in the middle ranks even among eighth heaven celestial kings. What could this mean? The treasure in Ling Han's hands was at the ninth heaven celestial king tier. Lin Xian's heart immediately throbbed wildly. To say nothing of him, even his master would be envious if he found out about this kind of treasure. Thus, he definitely could not allow the news to leak out, or there would be nothing left of the treasure for him. Initially, the best idea was to contact the spiritual mountain celestial king, but now Lin Xian changed his mind. He just stayed and waited outside the blood mist. In any case, this swamp was not very big. He only had to sit by and wait here, and when Ling Han came out, he could deliver a fatal strike. No matter how long it took, he would continue waiting. Ling Han entered into the depths of this swamp, and as the blood mist diffused, a great portion of the landscape affected his visibility. Even he could only see what was just 30 meters around him, and anything that surpassed this distance would only be a blurry, vague sight to him. It was completely empty inside here, but if there was anything strange, it was the fact that the swamp waters were completely blood-red in color, as if it was the evaporation of these bloody waters that had created such a large mass of blood mist. Ling Han did not know exactly how terrifying this blood mist was. Under the protection of the Celestial King tier skin, it was like he was untouchable. Ling Han was sure that if this thing could be active continuously, even a seventh heaven Celestial King bone could not do anything to him, because Xiao Ji Yu could barely compare to an eighth heaven Celestial King. Then, even if this skin was slightly inferior, it would still be capable of matching seventh heaven Celestial King tier, right? Unfortunately, he could not activate it at all. Ling Han stood still. A dark shadow had appeared ahead of him. It was like a pillar that had been stabbed upright into the ground. What on earth is this? He set off again, and that dark shadow became clearer and clearer, while Ling Han's expression became more and more shocked. This was actually the leg of an insect, but it was not complete, and was merely a section of it. Black spikes covered the entirety of the leg, exuding an eerily cold light, and the place it had been broken off at was presently dripping with blood, and it was precisely this that was the source of the blood waters of this swamp. What's going on? Why would the ancient map lead him all the way here? Wasn't it said that there was a celestial medicine that was several 100 billion years old here? And it was this thing. If anyone were to declare that this was a celestial medicine, even if it was a celestial king, Ling Han would call him an idiot. He had walked too closely, and the broken-off leg released a ripple, which turned into millions and millions of blood insects that assaulted Ling Han. The celestial king Tear skin immediately glowed, blocking these blood insects. Ling Han couldn't help but gape. Could it be that the insect leg he had previously discovered had the same origins as this thing? It was not impossible. Ling Han studied it carefully, and the spikes on the broken-off leg looked very much like an insect's leg, and if they were broken off, it was completely discernible that this was a broken-off insect leg. The insect's leg would be broken off here, and with the traces of the wound being so obvious, it had clearly been torn off with force. Then, at least 10 epochs ago, a great battle had broken out here, and an elite had had his leg torn off. Then, was one of the sides of the battle Xiao Gu's past life? This is Heavenly Venerable Tear Aura, Small Tower suddenly declared. What? Ling Han was incredibly stunned. Heavenly Venerable Tear, this insect leg was at the Heavenly Venerable Tear? Hold on, he had previously sensed the evil aura given off by those insects, and they were not recognized by the Heavenly Tao. Could it be? That's right. It's not a Heavenly Venerate that originates from this space, Small Tower stated solemnly. There is no information about this Heavenly Venerate of the foreign realm in my memory. It is highly possible that he invaded before I was even born. At this, Ling Han was really shocked. He had actually discovered the leg of a Heavenly Venerable Tear here, though it was not the slightest bit pleasant to look at, furry and covered with spikes. Was every being in the foreign realm ugly? Going by that theory, could it be that Xiao Jiyu had been a Heavenly Venerate in his last life as well? That's not right. Wasn't he called the Bone Demon Celestial King? Ling Han suddenly clammed up. The Bone Demon Celestial King was Xiao Gu's last life, but it was said that he had also ascended Dao from his origins as a bone. What bone would be so powerful, to not only gain consciousness, but even ascend to become a ninth heaven celestial king? If it was the bone left behind by a Heavenly Venerate, then there would be nothing strange about it. Heavenly Venerable Tear was really that awesome. Which also means that there hadn't actually been just 4 Heavenly Venerates in the celestial realm at that time, but rather, 5 of them. Chapter 2152 Ancient Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2152 Ancient Heavenly Venerate. How many years had the celestial realm existed for? No one knew. Perhaps those 3 Heavenly Venerates knew, but who would dare ask them? In such a long passage of time, what would be strange about having as many as 5 or even 6 Heavenly Venerates appear? That's not right. Ling Han immediately said. I remember that you have said that the most terrifying battle of the invasion of the foreign realm only broke out 8 epochs ago, but this clearly is a mystery realm that has already existed since the ancient age. In terms of time, this does not match. Unless. Small Tower immediately continued. The foreign realm has long since invaded the celestial realm before. Ling Han nodded. Why had this battle never been heard of before, even when a Heavenly Venerate has died? There would be lapses in history. This is very normal. If the battle at that time was too tragic, leading to the deaths of all the cultivators, it is natural that the tale could not possibly be left behind. Years later, the world of cultivation was revitalized, and produced a new generation, Small Tower said. Which also meant that over a dozen epochs ago, the foreign realm had already invaded, and the celestial realm of that era had managed to successfully stop them. Of course, they'd also paid an exorbitant price, but the connecting point between the 2 realms that had been opened had also been blocked. Hence, a considerable number of epochs had passed again, and this connecting point was once again opened, leading to a new wave of invasion. At that time, the foreign realm were invaders, but if the celestial realm had to pay the sacrifice of having the entire world of cultivation eliminated just to destroy the invaders, that meant that the gap in strength between both sides was extremely wide. It should be known that in a battle in the celestial realm, the foreign cultivators would be hindered by this heaven and earth, and they would not be able to draw on the regulations of this heaven and earth at all, and they managed to destroy all the cultivators of the celestial realm even then, so the gap in strength naturally could not be more obvious. Perhaps, the reason the invasion of the foreign realm ended in failure previously was because they had underestimated the strength of the celestial realm, and thought that when only a few epochs had passed, the world of cultivation of the celestial realm would not have recovered yet, and they became careless. But going by that theory, this time, the foreign realm would send out greater strength, yet there is one less heavenly venerate on the side of the celestial realm than the last time. Then, when the next great war breaks out, will the celestial realm still manage to stop them? Ling Han and Small Tower both fell silent, and felt like a heavy rock was weighing down on their hearts. It would be useless to think of these matters. I only have to concentrate on strengthening myself. Ling Han immediately regained his confidence. He wanted to become a heavenly venerate as soon as possible. Perhaps the strength of the celestial realm would still be lower than the foreign realms even when he became a heavenly venerate, but when he was qualified to join the war, he would at least be able to have control over his own fate. However, I still don't understand. Why did this ancient map, or rather this heavenly venerable tear skin, want to lead me here? Ling Han stroked his chin. Was it just to see this furry and incredibly creepy insect leg? I understand, Small Tower said suddenly. This place contains the last source power of heaven and earth that you need, Small Tower said slowly. What? Ling Han was both shocked and overjoyed. It's not an ordinary source power of heaven and earth, but rather the most mysterious and profound source power of time, Small Tower said. Oh. Ling Han nodded, not very concerned. Small Tower swayed from side to side, indicating a shake of the head. Idiot. Any regulation would be the same in Celestial King tier, and there are 9 source powers of heaven and earth, so what's so different? Ling Han explained his own rationale. Exceedingly wrong. Small Tower shook its head. Time is the most important regulation of this world, but at the same time, it is also incredibly simple. Past, present, and future. It only has these 3 changes, so there is only a single regulation of time. Only one. Ling Han also became serious. There are 9 of all the other source powers of heaven and earth, but there is only one regulations of time, which is equivalent to 9 combined into one. Do you think that is the same? Small Tower countered. Ling Han nodded. The regulations of time should be the most valuable source power of heaven and earth. In truth, the regulations of time were also the most frightening regulations of heaven and earth. Even in the Celestial King tier, even if it could not overwhelm the other regulations of heaven and earth, it was still incredibly powerful. At first, I thought that if you could gain the 9th source power of heaven and earth, that could only be poison, but I never thought that this unique and sole source power of time would actually appear here. Small Tower appeared extremely stunned. Which also means that the karmic life Heavenly Venerable had also not managed to obtain the regulations of time then? Ling Han asked. Of course. Small Tower had never been one to give Ling Han any face. Ling Han did not take it to heart. He naturally knew that this was speaking nonsense, but to be capable of surpassing the karmic life Heavenly Venerable in some aspect made him feel very pleased. Otherwise, he would keep feeling that he was just walking the latter's path, one step at a time, and nothing had changed in the slightest. He did not want to do that. He wanted to walk his own path. Then where is the source power of time? Ling Han asked, seeming slightly anxious. Once he obtained the source power of time, he would immediately enter into the Black Tower for seclusion, and directly form his 9th divided soul. Then, he would come out to beat up the idiot Lin Xian. Since this map has led you here, the answer naturally lies within it, Small Tower said, practically pushing all the responsibility onto the map. Ling Han took up the map, and again poured his divine sense inside, searching for the means to obtain the source power of time. Wang, the Heavenly Venerable tear skin exploded in light, and that seal released even more brilliant light. A supreme aura instantly enshrouded the entire mystery realm. So what if they were 8th heaven or 7th heaven celestial kings? Their hearts still shuddered wildly, as if they were faced with a great foe. However, this aura was controlled so that it was only felt within the range of the mystery realm. Otherwise, if it spread out, it would probably draw a few supreme beings over. For example, the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. Boom, that insect's leg glowed eerily, releasing an attack towards the Heavenly Venerable tier skin. These two existences were both at the Heavenly Venerable tier years ago, and while their owners had obviously died by now, the little bit that was left behind was still extremely terrifying. If it were not for the fact that he was protected by the Heavenly Venerable tier skin, Ling Han would definitely have long since been ground into dust. However, Ling Han also had a Heavenly Venerable tier tool. He only had to enter into the Black Tower, and he was sure that there should be no problem for it to just match the remains of a Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han discovered that this Heavenly Venerable tier skin was actually destroying the aura of the insect leg. No, destroying was not an appropriate word. Both sides were more or less equal, and neither could suppress the other. Thus, they were cancelling each other out. The seal on the Heavenly Venerable tier skin became dimmer and dimmer, and the flow of blood from the insect leg also became dimmer. Finally, when a certain point was reached, boom, the Heavenly Venerable tier skin in Ling Han's hands burned fiercely, and was instantly burnt into ashes, no longer existing in this world, and the insect's leg also stopped bleeding. It rapidly decomposed, and turned into ash which dissolved in the waters. Thankfully, there was still a streak of light on Ling Han. That was what the Heavenly Venerable tier skin had bestowed on him before disappearing, which continued to protect him from being corroded by the blood mist. Just at this moment, Ling Han sensed a different aura. Source power of heaven and earth. Though each and every source power of heaven and earth was different, since they were all birthed from the heaven and earth and were manifestations of great Tao, it was natural that they would have similarities in their essence. Thus, he could immediately confirm that this was the aura of a source power of heaven and earth. It was suppressed beneath the insect leg. At the time, the Heavenly Venerate of the foreign realm should have died together with Xiao Gu's past incarnation, but before it died, it had still used its corpse to suppress the source power of time, and Xiao Gu's past version had taken the form of a layer of skin, which refined itself into a map to guide future visitors to come to this place to retrieve the source power of heaven and earth. The two great Heavenly Venerates both went to so much effort, and this was proof enough of the importance of the source power of time. If it was obtained by the foreign realm, it would definitely cause a massive blow to the celestial realm, and if Ling Han obtained it, then he would gain endless benefits. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.